My name's Sarah, and I'm about to turn 20. Right now, I'm knee-deep in finals week at college, where I'm studying finance. It's a tough major, but I've always had a knack for numbers. As I sit here in my dorm room, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, I can't help but think about my upcoming birthday. My family's planning to celebrate it once I finish my exams. Family celebrations, they always leave a bitter taste in my mouth. Growing up, I always felt like the black sheep. My older sister, Emma, is 25 now. She's always been the golden child, the one my parents doted on. Me? I was just there. An afterthought. I remember this one time when I was 8. It was Emma's 13th birthday, and my parents threw her this massive party. There was a bouncy castle, a magician, and a cake bigger than me. I was so excited, thinking my birthday would be just as grand. When my birthday rolled around a few months later, all I got was a small cake from the grocery store and a pair of socks. I tried not to cry, but I couldn't help it. My mom just patted my head and said, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It's just a birthday." That's when I first realized I was different. Less important, somehow. As I grew older, the feeling only intensified. Emma got the newest phone every year, while I inherited her old ones. She got designer clothes, I got hand-me-downs. When she graduated high school, my parents bought her a car. When I graduated, they gave me a gift card to the local bookstore. My grandmother, though? She's different. She's always treated me like I was special. When I told her I wanted to study finance, she was thrilled. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Sarah," she said. "You'll go far." And now, she's insisted on arranging my birthday celebration. She even gave my parents several $1,000s to make it happen. I was shocked when I heard about it. My parents usually brush off my birthdays, but they didn't argue with Grandma. They just took the money and told me to focus on my exams. I overheard Emma throwing a fit about it. "Why does she get a big party?" she whined. "I could use that money for a trip I've been wanting to take." Grandma shut her down quick. "Hush now, Emma. Everyone spoils you as it is. Didn't I just give you 10 grand for rent? And you're still living at home." Emma went quiet after that. I couldn't help but feel a little smug. So here I am, cramming for my last exam. It's tomorrow, and then I'm free. Free to celebrate my birthday, free to feel special for once. The next day, I walked out of my last exam feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My classmates were chattering excitedly about summer plans, but all I could think about was my upcoming birthday celebration. As I made my way back to my dorm, my phone buzzed with messages. My college friends were wishing me an early happy birthday, knowing I'd be heading home soon. It felt good to be remembered, even if it was just by people I'd known for a couple of years. "Happy almost birthday, Sarah," my roommate, Jess, called out as I entered our shared space. "You ready for the big family shindig?" I nodded, trying to muster up some enthusiasm. "Yeah, should be interesting." Jess raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound too excited. Everything okay?" I sighed, flopping onto my bed. "It's just, my family. They're not exactly the warm and fuzzy type, you know? Especially when it comes to me. But your grandma organized this whole thing, right? That's gotta count for something," Jess pointed out. "True," I admitted. "Grandma's always been different. She actually seems to like me." As I packed my backpack for the trip home, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was a mix of hope and dread, hope that for once, my birthday would be special, and dread that somehow, it would all go wrong. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. My mind kept wandering to what awaited me. Would the house be decorated? Would there be a cake? Would my parents actually look happy to see me? As I walked up the driveway, I took a deep breath. The house looked normal. No balloons, no streamers, nothing to indicate a celebration was about to happen. But maybe they were keeping it all inside, I thought, trying to stay positive. I opened the front door, calling out, "Mom? Dad? I'm home." The house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposed to be prepping for a party. I frowned, dropping my backpack by the door and making my way to the living room. My parents were there, sitting on the couch, looking oddly uncomfortable. There was no sign of any party preparations. Hi," I said, confusion creeping into my voice. "Where's all the, birthday stuff?" My mom and dad exchanged a glance that made my heart sink. "About that, Sarah," my dad started, his voice oddly detached. "We decided not to organize your birthday party." I blinked, sure I had misheard. "What? But Grandma gave you money for it." We gave the money to Emma for her trip," my mom cut in. "She and her boyfriend flew to Hawaii a couple of days ago." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my eyes start to sting with tears. You what?" "But it was for my birthday." "Grandma gave it to you for my birthday." My dad shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Emma needed a vacation. You understand, don't you?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Understand?" "No, I don't understand. It was supposed to be my birthday party. I invited people. What am I supposed to tell them?" "We've already taken care of that," my mom said, her tone dismissive. "We called everyone and told them you were having problems with college and that the party was cancelled." I stood there, shock giving way to anger. "You lied to them? About me? How could you do this?" My dad's face hardened. "That's enough, Sarah. You need to learn to obey us and stop being so selfish." "Selfish?" I almost screamed the word. "How am I being selfish? It was my birthday, my party." Just then, the front door opened. I turned, hoping it was Emma, back early and feeling guilty. Instead, I saw my grandmother step inside, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Where's the party?" I looked at my parents, waiting to see how they'd explain this away. They hesitated, fumbling for words. In that moment, something in me snapped. "There is no party, Grandma," I said, my voice shaking. "They gave the money to Emma for a trip to Hawaii instead." The look on my grandmother's face was one I'd never seen before. It was a mix of fury and disappointment, all directed at my parents. "Is this true?" she demanded. My parents couldn't meet her gaze. Their silence was all the confirmation she needed. Grandma turned to me, her expression softening. "Sarah, dear, go pack your things. You're coming with me." I didn't need to be told twice. As I rushed to throw some clothes into my backpack, I could hear my grandmother's voice, low and angry, talking to my parents. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. When I came back downstairs, Grandma was waiting by the door. Without a word to my parents, we left the house and got into her car. As we drove away, I finally let the tears fall. 20 years of feeling unloved and unwanted came pouring out. Grandma reached over and patted my hand. "Don't you worry, dear," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll sort this out. You deserve better than this, and it's high time someone showed you that." Grandma drove us to her house, a beautiful 2-story home on the outskirts of town. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. "This might not be the party you were expecting, Sarah, but we're going to celebrate your birthday properly." Once inside, Grandma immediately got on her phone. I watched in amazement as she ordered what sounded like enough food to feed an army, all for rush delivery. "I hope you're hungry," she said with a wink as she hung up. "We've got quite a feast coming our way." As we waited for the food to arrive, Grandma bustled around the kitchen, pulling out her best china and silverware. I offered to help, but she shooed me away. "It's your birthday, dear. You just relax." So I sat at the kitchen table, watching her work. After a few minutes of silence, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Grandma," I started, my voice small. Why don't they love me?" She paused in her preparations, turning to face me with a sad look in her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to be wrestling with something internally. Then she sighed and sat down across from me. "Oh, Sarah," she said, reaching out to take my hand. "I suppose it's time you knew the truth." My heart started racing. "The truth about what?" Grandma took a deep breath. "Your parents, they didn't want you to be born." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs as if I'd been punched. "What?" "They thought Emma was enough," Grandma continued, her voice gentle but firm. "But I convinced them to have you. Your mother, she had a difficult pregnancy, and the birth was complicated. She almost died." I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. So it's my fault?" "No," Grandma said forcefully. "No, Sarah, it's not your fault at all. These things happen sometimes. But your mother, she tried to avoid you after that. And your father and Emma followed her lead." I sat there, stunned. All these years, I'd known something was off, but I'd never imagined this. Just then, the doorbell rang. Our food had arrived. As Grandma went to get it, I sat there, trying to process everything I'd just learned. The next few hours passed in a blur. Grandma and I ate our way through a ridiculous amount of food. She regaled me with stories from her youth, making me laugh, despite the heaviness in my heart. As the night wore on, I found myself relaxing, truly enjoying my birthday for the first time in years. As we were finishing up the last of the cake, Grandma's phone rang. She glanced at it, then back at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "It's your sister," she said. "Shall we see what she has to say?" I nodded, curiosity getting the better of me. Grandma put the phone on speaker. "Hello?" Emma's voice came through, sounding panicked. "Grandma? Why is my card blocked? What's going on?" Grandma's voice was cool when she replied. "Hello, Emma. I see you've discovered there are consequences for your actions." "What? What actions? What are you talking about?" Emma's voice was rising in pitch. "Your behavior, and that of your parents, has been absolutely shameful," Grandma said firmly. "Taking money meant for your sister's birthday for your own selfish desires? I'm deeply disappointed in you." There was a pause, then Emma's voice came back, angry now. "Oh, come on. Mom and Dad did the right thing giving me that money. Sarah doesn't need some big party. You're just a crazy old woman who—" "That's quite enough," Grandma cut her off, her voice like steel. "I've heard all I need to hear." And with that, she hung up. I stared at her, wide-eyed. "Grandma, did you really block her card?" She nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. "I did. And your parents' account too. It's time they learned to stand on their own 2 feet." As if on cue, the phone started ringing again. This time, it was my parents. Grandma ignored it, turning back to me. "Now then," she said, as if we hadn't just dropped a bombshell on my family's finances, "how about we plan out the rest of your birthday week?" The days I spent with Grandma were like a dream, a stark contrast to the nightmare that had been my birthday. For once, I felt truly loved and appreciated. We went shopping, visited museums, and just enjoyed each other's company. But all good things must come to an end, and soon it was time for me to return to my dorm and focus on my summer classes. As I unpacked my bags in my small dorm room, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, seeing a flood of notifications, missed calls, and messages from my parents and Emma. With a sigh, I sat on my bed and started scrolling through them. The first one was from my mom. "Sarah, you need to talk to your grandmother right now. This is unacceptable." Then my dad. "We're your parents. You owe us your loyalty. Make her unblock our accounts." Emma's messages were even worse. "You little brat. Is this what you wanted? To ruin everything for us? We're stuck in Hawaii because of you. Fix this now." I felt my hands shaking as I read through them all. The audacity they had to demand my help after what they'd done was mind-boggling. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. This is between you and Grandma. I won't get involved. Please don't contact me about this again. I hit send and then blocked their numbers, but the peace didn't last long. They started calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails filled with demands and insults. During one particularly nasty call that I mistakenly answered, my mother's words cut deep. "You ungrateful little trash," she spat. "I should have never given birth to you. I should have had an abortion instead." That was the last straw. I ended the call and blocked every number they tried to reach me from. Tears streamed down my face as I curled up on my bed, my mother's words echoing in my head. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my studies, trying to drown out the pain with textbooks and assignments. Occasionally, I'd call Grandma, seeking comfort in her calm, confident voice. "How are you holding up, dear?" she'd ask, her tone always warm and concerned. "I'm okay, Grandma," I'd reply, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Just focusing on my classes." "That's my girl," she'd say, pride evident in her voice. "Remember, you're stronger than you know. Don't let them get to you." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. While my parents and sister had shown their true colors, Grandma had become my rock, my safe harbor in this storm. It was a crisp autumn day, about 2 months after the birthday fiasco. I was walking across campus, my mind preoccupied with an upcoming finance exam, when I heard someone call my name. "Sarah." I turned and froze. There, jogging towards me with a $1,000,000 smile, was Jake, my sister Emma's boyfriend. The same Jake who was with her in Hawaii. He was as handsome as ever, and I couldn't help but notice the envious glances from other girls as he approached. Before I could react, he swept me into a hug. I stood there, stiff and confused, as he pulled away, still grinning. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I managed to ask, acutely aware of the stares we were attracting. "I was hoping to run into you," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Can we talk? There's a cafe just off campus." Every instinct told me to say no, but curiosity got the better of me. "Okay, but I can't stay long." As we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe, Jake leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something important." I braced myself, expecting news about my family. What he said next, however, caught me completely off guard. "I want to date you," he blurted out, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to leave Emma. For you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "What? Jake, what are you talking about? You're with my sister." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been in love with you for a long time, Sarah. I was only dating Emma to be close to you. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true." As he spoke, my mind raced. This didn't make any sense. Jake had never shown any interest in me before. In fact, he'd always seemed to barely notice my existence when he was around Emma. Something fishy was definitely going on here. I decided to play along, to see where this would lead. Forcing a shy smile, I said, "Wow, Jake. That's really sweet. I had no idea you felt that way." His face lit up, clearly encouraged by my response. "Really? So, what do you think? Would you give us a chance?" I pretended to consider it, then said, "This is a lot to take in. Can I have some time to think about it? Maybe we could meet again in a week." "Of course," Jake agreed eagerly. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Sarah." After he left, I remained at the cafe, sipping my coffee and turning the bizarre encounter over in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that this sudden declaration of love was connected to my grandmother's decision to cut off my family financially. But how? And what did Jake hope to gain? I had barely stepped out of the cafe, my head still spinning from Jake's bizarre declaration, when my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. With a deep sigh, I answered. "You backstabbing little trash." Emma's voice screeched through the speaker. How could you do this to me? I pulled the phone away from my ear, wincing at her volume. Emma, what the hell are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, you home-wrecking slut. My patience snapped. Shut up right now and explain what's going on, or I'm hanging up. There was a moment of stunned silence before Emma spoke again, her voice trembling with rage. Jake just dumped me. He said he's going to date you instead. How could you? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? Emma, I swear I had no idea. Oh, don't act all innocent, she spat. I bet you're thrilled about this, aren't you? Well, guess what? He's only after you for Grandma's money. My mind reeled. Grandma's money? What are you talking about? Emma let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you don't know? Well, let me fill you in, little sister. Grandma's cutting Mom, Dad, and me out of her will. She's leaving everything to you. I leaned against a nearby wall, feeling dizzy. But, why would she do that? Because she found out about Mom and Dad's plan, Emma said, her voice dripping with resentment. They filed to have her declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of her assets. But the old bat caught wind of it somehow. I felt sick. They did what? You heard me, Emma sneered. And now we're all cut off. Except for you, of course. The perfect little heiress. The pieces started falling into place. So that's why Jake suddenly wants to date me? Because of Grandma's money? Bingo, Emma said. Give the girl a prize. God, that vile old woman. I hope she... I cut her off, my voice cold. Don't you dare finish that sentence, Emma. I don't know who's worse in this situation, you and our parents for trying to steal from Grandma, or Jake for being a gold-digging snake. Emma gasped. How dare you? No, how dare you? I shot back. All of you. You're all despicable. I don't want to talk to you anymore, Emma. Don't call me again. I hung up, my hand shaking. Tears pricked at my eyes, a mix of anger and hurt threatening to overwhelm me. How could my family do this? How could they be so cruel, so greedy? With shaking hands, I dialed Grandma's number. She answered promptly, her voice warm and comforting. Sarah, dear. Is everything all right? I took a deep breath. Grandma, I just found out about, well, everything. The inheritance, Mom and Dad trying to declare you incompetent. Is it true? There was a brief pause, then Grandma chuckled. Oh, my dear. I was wondering when you'd hear about all that drama. Yes, it's true. She proceeded to recount the tale, her voice filled with a mix of amusement and disappointment. You should have seen their faces when the commission showed up at my door. I invited them in for tea, answered all their questions, and even did a few Sudoku puzzles to prove my mental acuity. I couldn't help but smile, picturing the scene. So what happened? Well, Grandma continued. They left quite satisfied that I was of sound mind. Your parents' ridiculous claim was rejected, of course. After that, I had no choice but to protect my assets, and you, from their greed. I've left them the house, but the rest, well, that's all going to you, my dear. I felt overwhelmed. Grandma, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Sarah. Just promise me you'll use it wisely. I want you to take over the company one day, to build on what I've created. I promise, Grandma. I won't let you down. After that conversation, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. My family, if I could even call them that anymore, became strangers to me. I blocked their numbers, ignored their attempts to reach out. They had shown their true colors, and I wanted nothing to do with them. A week after my conversation with Jake, true to his word, he showed up again. His confident smile faltered when he saw the cold look in my eyes. Sarah, he began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Save it, Jake, I spat. I know all about your little scheme. You and my sister deserve each other, you're both vile and mercenary. His facade crumbled instantly. "You're making a big mistake," he sneered. "You're a fool to refuse a guy like me." I couldn't help but laugh. "A guy like you? You mean a gold digger with no moral compass?" "No, thanks. I think I'll pass." As he stormed off, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was free from the manipulation, the lies, the constant feeling of inadequacy that had plagued me for so long. Over the next few months, Grandma took me under her wing, teaching me the ins and outs of running a successful company. We spent weekends poring over financial reports, discussing business strategies, and planning for the future. "You have a good head for business, Sarah," she'd often say, beaming with pride. "You're going to do great things." For the first time in my life, I felt truly valued, truly loved. The pain of losing my parents and sister still lingered, but it was overshadowed by the joy of finding my place in the world. My name is Monica, and I was born into a family of musical theater actors. You'd think that would mean a life full of drama and excitement, but for me, it mostly meant a childhood of waiting. Waiting for my parents to come home, waiting for them to take me with them, waiting for the day they'd give up their careers and finally be real parents to me. I grew up with my grandparents, my mom's parents. They were good people, don't get me wrong. They took care of me, made sure I had everything I needed. But they weren't my parents, you know? My grandfather, he had this restaurant. It wasn't just any old place, it had this unique retro-style interior that people loved. The business did well, brought in good money. So yeah, I grew up in nice conditions. But my grandparents, they were careful not to spoil me. They took my upbringing seriously. My parents? They were always on tour with their theater troupe. At least, that's what they told me. They'd call sometimes, but not often. When they did come home, it was more like a visit. They'd swing by, give me some gifts, ask how I was doing. But they never took me home with them. It was always, "Next time, Monica, we promise." Even when they had breaks or vacations, they'd leave me with my grandparents. "We need rest," they'd say. "We need some free time." Always with the promise that things would change soon. That they'd give up their careers and come for me. That we'd be a real family. As I grew older, I started to notice things. The way my grandmother would purse her lips when my parents' names were mentioned. The way my grandfather's eyes would harden when he talked about their tours. "They're busy people, Monica," my grandmother would say, but her tone suggested she didn't quite believe it herself. I tried to focus on the good things. My grandparents' love, the bustling restaurant, the comfortable life we had. But there was always that hole, that emptiness where my parents should have been. I'd watch other kids with their moms and dads, going to the park, having ice cream, doing all those normal family things. And I'd wonder, what was wrong with me? Why didn't my parents want to do those things with me? But I never stopped hoping. Never stopped believing that one day, they'd keep their promise. That one day, we'd be a real family. My 12th birthday started like a dream come true. For once, my parents were actually here, showering me with attention and gifts. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw them walk through the door, their faces beaming with smiles I'd only seen in old photographs. "Monica, sweetheart," Mom called out, arms wide open. I ran to her, breathing in her familiar perfume. "Mom, Dad. You're really here." Dad ruffled my hair affectionately. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo. Happy birthday." We spent the entire day together, doing all the things I'd always imagined doing with my parents. We went to the local amusement park, had ice cream, and they even sat through my impromptu piano recital without checking their phones once. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had real parents, not just occasional visitors. As the day wound down and we returned to my grandparents' house, I couldn't stop grinning. This was it, I thought. This was the day everything would change. "Time for bed, Monica," Grandma said gently. "It's been a big day." I didn't want it to end, but I was exhausted. "Okay, Grandma." "Mom, Dad, you'll still be here tomorrow, right?" They exchanged a quick glance before Dad answered, "Of course, sweetheart. We'll see you in the morning." I went to bed that night feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. But my happiness was short-lived. About an hour later, I woke up thirsty. As I crept downstairs to get some water, I heard raised voices coming from Grandpa's office. Curiosity got the better of me, and I inched closer to the door. "How dare you?" Grandpa's voice boomed. "You abandoned your daughter for years, and you still haven't taken her home as you promised." "Dad, please," Mom's voice, usually so controlled, sounded shrill. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Grandpa cut her off. "I gave you money to start that eco-village of yours. The condition was that you'd take Monica and be a proper family. But you're not even working as actors anymore, are you? No more tours, just excuses." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. No more tours? But they'd always said. We never wanted her in the first place. Mom's scream made me flinch. I didn't want to give birth to her. It was you who insisted we keep her instead of having an abortion. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They never wanted me? Mom continued, her voice dripping with venom. "Monica always got in the way. I've never felt any love for that child. Do you know how much I sacrificed? My figure, my career, everything." I stood there, frozen, as my world crumbled around me. The perfect day I'd just experienced felt like a cruel joke now. My father's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Look," he said, his tone eerily calm, "let's not pretend I'm any better here. I didn't want Monica to be born either. I dreamed of living my own life, free from responsibilities. A child was never part of the plan." I felt my knees go weak. Even Dad, who I'd always thought was the more caring of the two, didn't want me. I had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. Grandpa's voice, filled with disappointment and anger, responded, "I had hoped that over time, you'd both come to your senses. That you'd stop being so damn selfish. I thought having Monica would soften your hearts, make you more responsible. But clearly, I was wrong." "Oh, spare us the lecture," Mom spat back. "Stay out of our lives and leave everything as it is. You wanted a granddaughter so badly? Fine. You raise her yourself." There was a moment of tense silence before Grandpa spoke again, his voice cold and final. "All right, if that's how you want it. But don't expect another cent from me for your harebrained schemes. Find another investor for your precious eco-village. I'm done." I heard footsteps approaching and panicked. Quickly, I ducked behind a nearby sofa, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. The office door flew open, and I saw my parents storm out through a gap between the sofa and the floor. They slammed the front door so hard the windows rattled. Through the curtains, I watched their car speed away, not even a glance back at the house. Once I was sure the coast was clear, I crept back up to my room. As soon as I closed my bedroom door, the tears I'd been holding back came flooding out. I buried my face in my pillow to muffle my sobs. How could they? How could my parents, the people I'd idolized and longed for all my life, not want me? The perfect day we'd just had felt like a cruel joke now. I cried all night, my pillow soaked with tears. By morning, my eyes were puffy and red, my throat raw from crying. When Grandma knocked on my door to wake me up, I managed to croak out that I wasn't feeling well. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, coming in to feel my forehead. "You do feel a bit warm. Must be all the excitement yesterday. You just rest, okay?" I nodded weakly, feeling guilty for the lie, but knowing I couldn't face them right now. How could I look at my grandparents knowing what I knew? How could I pretend everything was normal when my whole world had been turned upside down? That day marked the end of my childhood innocence. The fantasy of a happy family reunion was shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of my parents' true feelings. I knew I could never look at them the same way again. 3 years passed since that fateful birthday, and I'd learned to live with the knowledge I'd gained that night. I never told my grandparents what I'd overheard, and they continued to shower me with love and support. Life went on, and I tried my best to focus on school and helping out in the restaurant, pushing thoughts of my parents to the back of my mind. Then, just after my 15th birthday, everything changed again. I was in history class when the principal came to get me. The look on his face told me something was terribly wrong before he even opened his mouth. "Monica, there's been an accident," he said gently. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as he explained. A train derailment. My grandparents were gone. Just like that. The next few days passed in a blur of black clothes and sympathetic murmurs. I felt numb, unable to process the loss of the two people who'd been my real parents in every way that mattered. Then, to my shock, my actual parents showed up at the funeral. They didn't even try to hide their lack of grief, their eyes dry and their voices steady as they made arrangements. "Well, I suppose we should take the girl," I overheard my mother say to my father, as if I was some piece of furniture they had to deal with. And just like that, I found myself moving into their home. To my surprise, they were almost nice. They gave me my own room, let me pick out furniture I liked. For a moment, I dared to hope. Maybe losing my grandparents had made them realize what was important. Maybe they'd changed. "Look, Monica," my mother said one evening, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, "I know we haven't always been there for you. But we want to make it right. This is a fresh start for all of us." I wanted to believe her. I really did. For a few weeks, everything seemed perfect. They asked about my day, helped with my homework, even sat down for family dinners. It was everything I'd ever wanted. But then I started noticing things. Hushed arguments when they thought I was asleep. Tense phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. One night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs for a glass of water and overheard them in the kitchen. "This is your fault," my mother hissed. "If you hadn't insisted on that ridiculous meditation yurt, we might actually be turning a profit by now." "My fault?" my father shot back. "Who was it that wanted to import those overpriced organic cotton sheets? Face it, you're as much to blame for this mess as I am." I froze on the stairs, listening as they tore into each other, accusing each other of incompetence and poor decision-making. It became clear that their eco-village, the business they'd chosen over raising me, was failing. "And now we're stuck with the girl," my mother spat. "I thought at least we'd get a decent inheritance from her grandparents, but it's nowhere near what we need to save this place." My heart sank. Of course. The sudden affection, the desire for a fresh start, it was all about money. They'd hoped my grandparents had left them a fortune, and now they were disappointed. I crept back to my room, feeling like a fool for ever believing things had changed. The perfect family I'd glimpsed these past few weeks was just another illusion, as false as all their promises had been over the years. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my new room, I realized that nothing had really changed. My parents were still the same selfish people they'd always been. The only difference was that now, I didn't have my grandparents to shield me from that reality. The months following my grandparents' death were a roller coaster of emotions and changes. One day, I came home from school to find my parents in a heated discussion about finances. "We have no choice," my father said, his voice strained. "We need to sell the house and the restaurant." My heart sank. "But, that's all I have left of them," I protested weakly. My mother's eyes were cold as she replied, "Don't be sentimental, Monica. It's just property." And just like that, my childhood home and my grandfather's beloved restaurant were sold off. I watched as strangers carted away the antique furniture, the family photos, the memories. My parents assured me it was for the best, that the money would save their eco-village business. But I knew better than to believe their promises by now. As the months wore on, their facade of affection crumbled completely. They bickered constantly, not even bothering to lower their voices when I was around anymore. I tried to tune it out, focusing instead on my studies. Despite everything, I managed to excel in school, even graduating early at 17. I was proud of myself, But when I broached the subject of college with my parents, their response was like a bucket of cold water. "College?" my mother scoffed. "Do you have any idea how much that costs? We can barely keep the business afloat as it is." But Grandpa always said he'd set aside money for my education," I said, my voice small. My father laughed mirthlessly. "Your grandfather said a lot of things, Monica. But there's no money." It was probably just another one of his empty promises. I wanted to argue, to insist that my grandfather would never lie to me. But I had no proof, no way to access any accounts he might have set up. And that's how I found myself working at the local coffee shop, taking orders and wiping down tables instead of sitting in college lectures. It wasn't what I'd dreamed of, but it was something. A start. A way to save up and maybe, just maybe, fund my own education one day. The months ticked by, and before I knew it, my 18th birthday arrived. I woke up that morning with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Maybe now that I was legally an adult, things would change. Maybe my parents would finally see me as a person, not just a burden. But as I came downstairs, I was met with the same indifference I'd grown accustomed to. No cake, no cards, not even a happy birthday. "Oh, is that today?" my mother said absently when I reminded her. "Well, have a good day at work, dear." I left the house with a heavy heart, trying to hold back tears as I made my way to the coffee shop. But to my surprise, I was greeted with streamers and a small cake when I arrived. "Happy birthday, Monica," my boss and coworkers chorused. For the first time that day, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. As we shared cake and laughs during our break, I realized something important. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about the people who show up for you, who celebrate your victories and support you through your struggles. The day after my underwhelming 18th birthday, I was at work, mechanically wiping down tables and taking orders, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Monica?" a professional-sounding voice asked. "This is Robert Johnson, your grandfather's lawyer. I need to meet with you regarding your grandfather's will. Can you come to my office today?" In a daze, I got permission from my boss to leave early and made my way to the lawyer's office. As I sat across from Mr. Johnson, I couldn't have prepared myself for what he was about to say. "Your grandfather left you a substantial inheritance, Monica," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "He set up a personal account for you, which you now have access to as you've turned 18. Additionally, he left a separate fund for your college education and living expenses." I stared at the numbers on the paper, my vision blurring with tears. It was more money than I'd ever imagined. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope, of possibility. When I got home, I found my parents in their usual spots, Mom scrolling through her phone, Dad watching TV. They barely looked up as I entered. Taking a deep breath, I announced, "Grandpa left me money for college." The reaction was immediate. They both jumped to their feet, eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" my mother shrieked. "How much?" I told them the amount, watching as their expressions morphed from shock to calculation. "Well," my mother said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet, "that explains why we inherited so little. Your grandfather always did favor you." I bristled at her tone, but pressed on. "I'm going to apply to colleges. With my grades, I might even qualify for partial scholarships." "Whoa, hold on there," my father interrupted. "Let's think about this rationally." What followed was a barrage of arguments against my going to college. They talked about the real-world experience I'd miss out on, the student debt I'd accrue, conveniently ignoring the funds specifically for my education, and how a degree didn't guarantee success. "Look," my mother said, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, "why don't you invest that money in our business instead? We're on the verge of a breakthrough with the eco-village. Once it takes off, we'll make sure you're set for life. You won't even need to work." As they continued their pitch, painting pictures of a luxurious future where I'd want for nothing, I found myself nodding along. But inside, a voice was screaming. I'd heard these promises before. I'd seen how they handled money, how they ran their business. And I knew, with a certainty that surprised even me, that they were lying. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm going to college. I'm going to live my own life, independently." The change in my parents was instant and terrifying. Their faces contorted with rage, all pretense of affection vanishing in an instant. "You ungrateful brat," my mother screeched. "After everything we've done for you." My father's voice was cold and threatening. "If that's how you want to play it, fine. You've got 6 months until college starts. See how you like living on the streets until then. We gave you a home," my mother cried, crocodile tears forming in her eyes. "We loved you, sacrificed for you." Something in me snapped. All the pain, all the disappointment, all the years of neglect came rushing to the surface. "Loved me?" I laughed bitterly. "You didn't even want me to be born." I heard everything. How you never wanted me, how I was just in the way. How you pawned me off on grandma and grandpa because you couldn't be bothered to be real parents. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I wasn't so hurt and angry. Years of pent-up emotions poured out of me as I recounted every harsh word, every broken promise. "You don't deserve to be called parents," I finished, my voice shaking. "And I don't need you to kick me out. I'm leaving." With that, I ran to my room and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. I could hear them yelling, threatening, but it all seemed distant now. As I zipped up my bag, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I spent that night in a cheap motel, curled up on a lumpy bed, but feeling freer than I ever had. The next morning, I called Sarah, a colleague from the coffee shop who I knew was looking for a roommate. "Hey, Sarah? Remember how you were saying you needed someone to split rent with? Is that offer still open?" By the end of the day, I had a new place to live, a new phone number, and a new outlook on life. As I blocked my parents' numbers and social media accounts, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. This wasn't how I'd imagined my family story going, but it was the fresh start I needed. That night, as I lay in my new bed in the small apartment I now shared with Sarah, I thought about everything that had happened. I'd lost the family I'd always longed for, but I'd gained something more valuable: independence, self-respect, and the chance to build a life on my own terms. With a mix of excitement and nerves, I sent off my college application. I'd chosen one of the best schools in the country for business management, hoping to honor my grandfather's legacy. The waiting was excruciating, but finally, the letter arrived. As I tore open the envelope, my heart pounding, I saw the word I'd been dreaming of: congratulations. I'd been accepted. In that moment, I felt my grandparents' presence, almost as if they were there celebrating with me. When fall came, I moved into my dorm room, my few possessions reminding me of how far I'd come. I paid my tuition from the account my grandfather had set up, but I was determined to make my own way as much as possible. So, I found a job at a local coffee shop, putting my barista skills to good use. "You don't have to work, you know," my roommate said one day as I rushed to make an early shift. "You've got that inheritance." I smiled as I laced up my shoes. "I know. But I want to. This is about more than money, it's about proving to myself that I can do this." College was challenging, but I thrived. Every business class I took, every late-night study session, brought me closer to my dream. I could almost see my grandfather nodding approvingly as I aced my exams and impressed my professors with my drive. 4 years flew by, and before I knew it, I was walking across the stage to receive my diploma. As I moved the tassel on my cap, I whispered, "We did it, Grandpa." Armed with my degree and the business acumen I'd gained, I dove into planning my own restaurant. I knew exactly what I wanted: a place that would honor my grandfather's memory and bring joy to people the way his restaurant had. I named it Giorgio's, after my grandfather. Using the photos I'd carefully preserved, I recreated the warm, retro-style interior that had made his place so special. Every detail, from the worn wooden bar to the vintage light fixtures, was a tribute to him. The first year was tough. There were nights I lay awake, worrying about bills and customer numbers. But I persevered, channeling my grandfather's determination and my own hard-won resilience. Slowly but surely, word spread. People fell in love with the atmosphere, the food, the story behind the place. 5 years after opening, Giorgio's was not just profitable, it was the talk of the town. I thought about my parents then, as I sometimes did. I'd seen them around town a few times, looking older and worn. Their eco-village dream had fizzled out long ago, I'd heard. Part of me felt a twinge of sadness for what could have been, but I knew I was better off without them. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd built it with my own 2 hands, with the love and support of my grandparents as my foundation. As I looked around the restaurant, my restaurant, I felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. I pulled out an old photo of my grandparents from my wallet. I did it, I whispered to their smiling faces. I hope I've made you proud. As I locked up and stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but every hardship, every obstacle had led me here. I was Monica, granddaughter of Giorgio, owner of Giorgio's restaurant, author of my own story. My name's Janet, and I've got a story to tell you. I've been married for 30 years now, but let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up with a dad who knew how to make things happen. He ran his own factory, building affordable homes for folks who needed them. When I met Tom, I thought I'd found my happily ever after. We got married young, and my dad, being the generous guy he was, gave us a house as a wedding gift. 2 years into our marriage, I had my son, Jake. I threw myself into being a mom, giving Jake all the love and attention I could. One day, when Jake was about 3, I brought up the idea of going back to work. Tom wasn't having it. "Janet, we've talked about this," he said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Jake needs you here. Your job is to take care of our son and keep this house running." That's what we agreed on, remember? I didn't remember agreeing to that, but I nodded anyway. It wasn't worth the fight. As the years went by, Tom grew more and more frustrated with his job. He was a sales manager, but he wanted more. One night, he came home in a foul mood, slamming doors and muttering under his breath. "What's wrong?" I asked, following him into the kitchen. He whirled around, his face red with anger. "What's wrong? I'll tell you what's wrong. I've been busting my ass at that company for years, and they passed me over for promotion again. Some young hotshot got it instead." I tried to comfort him, but he brushed me off. Then, his eyes lit up with an idea. "Your dad," he said, grabbing my shoulders. "Your dad could give me a job. A good one. You could talk to him, couldn't you?" I hesitated. My dad had always kept his business and family separate. But the look in Tom's eyes, I couldn't say no. "I'll talk to him," I promised. And I did. It took some convincing, but Dad agreed to give Tom a chance. I thought it would solve all our problems. Boy, was I wrong. Things were good for a while. Tom was making good money, and he seemed happier. But my life was poisoned by Tom's mother, Martha. The first time she showed up unannounced, I was elbow deep in laundry. The doorbell rang, and there she was, all fake smiles and judgmental eyes. "Janet, dear," she cooed, pushing past me into the house. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. "You don't mind, do you?" Before I could answer, she was in the living room, running a finger along the coffee table and skiing at the dust. "Oh my," she said, shaking her head. "You really should keep things cleaner, dear. My Tommy deserves better than this." I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. "I was just about to clean, actually. Can I get you something to drink?" She waved her hand dismissively. No, I'll make my own tea. You get back to your, whatever it is you do all day." That was just the beginning. Martha became a regular fixture in our lives, always dropping by unannounced, always criticizing. I tried talking to Tom about it, but he always took her side. Life went on like that for a while. I'd wake up, get Jake ready for school, clean the house, cook meals, and deal with Martha's surprise visits. Then came the night that changed everything. Tom burst through the door, his face twisted with rage. I was in the kitchen, fixing dinner, and nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "Tom, what's wrong?" I asked, setting the plate down carefully. He stormed into the kitchen, slamming his briefcase on the counter. "Your father," he spat, "is a tyrant and a despot. He humiliates people and uses them like they're nothing." I was shocked. My dad had always been kind and fair, at least as far as I knew. "What are you talking about? What happened?" Tom paced the kitchen, his hands clenched into fists. "I stood up for an employee today. Someone your father was treating unfairly. And you know what he did? He fired me. Just like that." My mind was reeling. This didn't sound like my dad at all. There must be some mistake. "Let me talk to him, I'm sure we can sort this out." "No," Tom roared, making me flinch. "You're not talking to him. You're not talking to any of them ever again. As far as we're concerned, your parents don't exist anymore. Do you understand me?" I nodded mutely, too stunned to argue. Tom had never spoken to me like this before, and it scared me. From that day on, our lives changed dramatically. Tom found another job and started earning well again, but he was different. Colder, more controlling. He forbade me from contacting my parents, and even Jake wasn't allowed to see his grandparents anymore. Years passed. Jake grew up, a quiet, thoughtful boy who seemed to sense the tension in our home. When he got accepted to a college in another city, I was both proud and heartbroken. Proud of my son's achievements, but devastated to lose the one person who made my life bearable. After Jake left, things got worse. Tom and Martha became more demanding, more belittling. They treated me like a servant, constantly criticizing and ordering me around. One afternoon, Martha barged in as usual. "Janet," she barked, "I need you to take me shopping. And then you're going to cook dinner for me and my friends. We're having a little get-together tonight." I was exhausted, having spent the morning scrubbing the house from top to bottom. "Martha, I'm really tired. Can we do this another day?" She looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Tired? You sit around this house all day doing nothing. Now get your purse, we're leaving in 5 minutes." I wanted to argue, to stand up for myself, but years of submission had worn me down. I got my purse and followed her out the door, hating myself for my weakness. When Tom came home that night, he was furious to find the house in disarray and no dinner ready. "What have you been doing all day?" he demanded. "This place is a mess, and where's my dinner?" I tried to explain about Martha's demands, but he wouldn't hear it. I went to bed that night feeling worthless, wondering how my life had come to this. Little did I know, things were about to take an even more dramatic turn. As the years passed, my life became a suffocating routine of servitude. Tom and Martha, his mother, seemed to take pleasure in belittling me at every turn. I was nothing more than their personal maid, cook, and punching bag for their frustrations. "Janet, these dishes aren't clean enough," Tom would bark, inspecting a plate with exaggerated disgust. "Do them again. And this time, try to be less useless." Martha was no better. She'd sweep into our house unannounced, her critical eyes taking in every imperfection. "Oh dear," she'd say with a dramatic sigh. "I don't know how my Tommy puts up with such a slovenly home. You really should try harder, Janet. A good wife would." Their words cut deep, chipping away at my self-esteem day by day. I felt worthless, trapped in a life I didn't recognize. The worst part was, I was too ashamed to tell anyone. When Jake would call from college, I'd put on a cheery voice. It was easier to pretend when Jake came to visit. Tom would transform into a different person, attentive, kind, even loving. It was like watching a skilled actor take the stage, and it left me feeling more confused and alone than ever. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. Janet? Is that you?" The voice on the other end was older, rougher, but unmistakable. My father. My heart raced. I hadn't spoken to him in years. "Dad?" I whispered, glancing around as if Tom might appear at any moment. "Janet, I need to tell you something. It's your mother. She's very ill. The doctors, they're not optimistic." I wanted to rush to her side immediately, but Tom's words echoed in my head. "Your parents don't exist anymore." "I'll try to come see her," I said, hating how weak I sounded. That night, I gathered my courage and approached Tom. "My father called today," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My mother is very sick. I'd like to visit her." Tom's face darkened. "Absolutely not. We've been over this, Janet. They're not part of our lives anymore." I retreated, tears stinging my eyes. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling more alone than ever. Despite my worry and guilt, I decided not to argue with Tom. I didn't go to see my mother. A year passed, filled with regret and anxiety. Then, another call came. "Janet," my father's voice was hollow this time. "Your mother, she's dying. The doctors say it's a matter of days now." This time, I couldn't stay silent. I approached Tom again, desperation in my voice. "Please, Tom. My mother is dying. I need to say goodbye." Tom glared at me, his jaw clenched. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Fine," he spat. "One day. That's all you get." Relief washed over me, mixed with a sadness so deep it threatened to overwhelm me. I called Jake immediately. "Jake, honey," I said when he answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your grandmother is dying. I'm going to see her tomorrow. Will you come with me?" There was only a moment's pause before Jake replied. "Of course, Mom. I'll be there." The next morning, Jake and I drove to my parents' house. My heart was pounding as we walked in. The house smelled of disinfectant and sadness. My mother lay in a hospital bed in the living room, looking small and frail. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Janet," she whispered. "My baby girl." I rushed to her side, taking her hand in mine. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. Can you ever forgive me?" She smiled weakly. "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You're here now." We talked for hours. I introduced her to Jake, now a grown man she barely knew. We shared memories, laughed a little, and cried a lot. As the sun began to set, my mother's breathing became labored. I held her hand tightly, and she looked at me one last time. "I love you, Janet," she said softly. And then she was gone, slipping away peacefully in my arms. The grief hit me like a physical blow. I cried until I had no tears left, Jake's comforting arm around my shoulders. When I finally looked up, I saw my father standing in the doorway, his face a mask of pain. I went to him, and we held each other, sharing our sorrow. In that moment, I realized how much he'd aged, how lost he looked, without my mother by his side. "I'm staying for a few days, Dad," I said. "To help with everything." He nodded gratefully, and I stepped away to call Tom. My hand shook as I dialed. "I'm staying for a few days," I told him when he answered. "For the funeral and to help Dad." "Like hell you are," Tom growled. "You get back here right now, Janet. I mean it." For the first time in our marriage, I stood my ground. "No, Tom. I'm staying." I hung up before he could argue further. The day of the funeral arrived. As we stood around my mother's grave, my phone kept ringing. Tom's name flashed on the screen again and again. I ignored it, focusing on saying goodbye to my mother. Then, in the midst of the eulogy, I accidentally hit the speakerphone button. Tom's voice blared out, loud and angry. "Janet, you better get your ass home right now, or I swear to God, I'll come and drag you back myself. You ungrateful, disobedient scum. Who do you think you are?" The gathered mourners stared in shock. Jake's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. My father looked like he'd been slapped. Burning with shame, I fumbled with the phone, finally managing to turn it off. My face was scarlet as I looked around at the stunned faces of friends and family. After the shocking phone call, my father gently took my arm and led me away from the crowd. Jake followed close behind, his face a mix of concern and anger. "Janet," my father said softly, his eyes searching mine, "does Tom always speak to you like that?" I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, shame washing over me. For a moment, I considered lying, maintaining the facade I'd kept up for so long. But looking into my father's kind eyes, I couldn't do it anymore. "Yes," I whispered, tears welling up. That's how he usually treats me." Jake's sharp intake of breath made me turn to him. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. I had no idea. I mean, sometimes things seemed off, but I never thought. I nodded, wiping away a tear. "You're right, honey. I'm sorry I never told you." My father's face hardened. "Janet, listen to me. There's something you need to know about Tom. When he worked for me years ago, I caught him stealing. Not just from the company, but from clients too." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What?" Dad nodded grimly. "He was inflating prices after contracts were signed, adding fake services. He'd overcharge customers and pocket the difference." My mind reeled. All these years, Tom had painted himself as the victim, and I'd believed him. I'd cut off my own parents because of his lies. "There's more," my father continued. "I recently heard from a friend that Tom's current company is under investigation. They've already found discrepancies and violations. I'd bet my last dollar Tom's behind it all." The pieces were falling into place, years of manipulation and deceit becoming clear. I felt sick to my stomach. Just then, my phone rang again. Tom's name flashed on the screen. With shaking hands, I answered and put it on speaker. "Janet, if you don't come home right now, we're through. You hear me? Divorced." Tom's voice was shrill with anger. "My mother's birthday is tomorrow, and we're celebrating at our house. You better be here to organize everything and prepare the food. Don't you dare embarrass me." Before I could respond, my father leaned in, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "Don't worry, Tom. Janet will be there. And so will I. We've got a few things to discuss." Jake stepped forward, his jaw set. "Count me in too, Mom. It's time we had a family meeting." The day after my mother's funeral, Dad, Jake, and I drove to my house. My stomach was in knots, but I felt stronger with them by my side. As we pulled up, I saw several cars parked outside. We walked in to find the living room full of people. Martha's friends were gathered around, chattering and laughing. Martha herself sat in the center like a queen holding court. When she spotted me, her face twisted into a scowl. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," she sneered. "You're late. My guests need to be served." Before I could respond, she snatched a rag from the table and threw it at me. "Make yourself useful and wipe down the table. Now." I caught the rag reflexively, years of obedience kicking in. But then I heard my father's voice, low and dangerous. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" he growled, stepping forward. Martha laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Your daughter? Please. Janet is married now. We're her family, not you. Now get out of our house and stop ruining my birthday." My father's face reddened. "Your house? I think you're mistaken, Martha. I own this house. I gave it to Janet as a wedding gift. And I'm telling you all to leave, now." The room fell silent. Martha's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Just then, Tom walked in, his face darkening as he took in the scene. "Janet," he snarled. "What's going on here? Take your father and get out. You're ruining Mother's party." Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. "No, Tom," I said, my voice steady. "You get out. Here are divorce papers. I don't want to see you or your mother ever again. This is my house, and I want you both to leave." Tom's face went pale, then red with rage. But before he could speak, I turned to the guests and told them I'd been treated like a servant in my own home for years. Jake confirmed every word I said. The guests shifted uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves. I saw looks of sympathy, shock, and in some cases, dawning understanding. "Get out," I repeated, looking directly at Tom and Martha. "All of you, please leave." To my surprise, Martha's friends started gathering their things. A few even muttered apologies as they hurried past. Tom and Martha stood frozen, disbelief etched on their faces. "This isn't over," Tom hissed as he finally moved towards the door, practically dragging his mother with him. As the door closed behind them, a profound silence fell over the house. Then, slowly, I felt a smile spread across my face. For the first time in years, I felt free. In the weeks following the confrontation at my house, life became a whirlwind of legal meetings and paperwork. I'd barely had time to process everything when news broke about Tom's company. The audit had been completed, and the results were damning. Just as my father had suspected, Tom's fraudulent activities were exposed. The evidence was overwhelming, and Tom was convicted. The judge's words still ring in my ears: "You will no longer be permitted to hold any senior positions in any company." My divorce lawyer, a fierce woman named Sarah, encouraged me to seek compensation. "You've endured years of emotional abuse and humiliation," she said. "You deserve restitution." I was hesitant at first, but Jake and Dad urged me on. In the end, the court agreed. Between the criminal charges and the divorce settlement, Tom found himself buried in debt. It was a strange feeling, knowing the tables had turned so completely. With the divorce finalized and the legal battles behind me, I decided it was time for a fresh start. I sold the house, too many painful memories lingered there. Dad insisted I move in with him. But the biggest change came when Dad invited me to work with him. "It's time you learned the family business," he said one morning over coffee. "What do you say?" I was terrified at first. I'd been out of the workforce for so long, and Tom's voice in my head kept telling me I was useless. But Dad was patient and encouraging. He showed me the ropes, explained the intricacies of running the affordable housing business he'd built. To my surprise, I took to it like a duck to water. Years of managing a household translated well to project management. My empathy helped in dealing with clients and employees alike. Dad beamed with pride every time I successfully closed a deal or solved a tricky problem. 3 years flew by. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, my world shifted again. Dad passed away in his sleep, peaceful and painless. The grief was overwhelming, but this time I wasn't alone. I had Jake, I had friends, I had a life of my own. As we sorted through Dad's affairs, we discovered he'd left everything to me: the business, the house, all of it. I sat in his office, now mine, looking at the photos on the wall. Mom and Dad on their wedding day. Me as a little girl. Jake's graduation photo. And a new one, Dad and me at the ribbon cutting of our latest housing project. "You've made me so proud," he'd said that day. "You're going to do great things, Janet." Sitting there, I made a silent promise to him. I would continue his legacy, but more than that, I would build my own. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities I'd never dreamed of just a few years ago. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and felt my blood run cold. There stood Tom, older and a bit more weathered, but with that same manipulative glint in his eye. "Janet," he said, his voice sickly sweet. "I heard about your father. I'm so sorry for your loss." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the doorknob. Tom took my silence as an invitation and stepped closer. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued. "I know I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I've changed. My mother passed away last year, and it made me realize what's truly important in life." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back instinctively. We could be happy again, Janet, he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. There's nothing standing in our way now. We could love each other again, like we used to. For a moment, I was transported back to the scared, submissive woman I used to be. Then, something bubbled up inside me, a laugh. It started small, but grew until I was doubled over, tears in my eyes. Tom's face contorted in confusion, then anger. What's so funny? He demanded. I straightened up, wiping my eyes. You are, Tom. The fact that you think you can waltz back into my life after everything you've done. The fact that you haven't changed at all. His face darkened. Now listen here, Janet. No, you listen, I cut him off, my voice steady and strong. Get out of my house. Forget my address. Forget I exist. Because if you ever show up here again, I'm calling the police. To drive my point home, I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. This wasn't the meek Janet he remembered. I watched him storm off, muttering curses under his breath. As I closed the door, I let out a long, calming breath. The encounter left me shaken, but also strangely empowered. I had faced my biggest fear and sent it packing. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Mom, great news. Sarah's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. Joy surged through me, washing away the last remnants of my encounter with Tom. Jake got married 2 years ago, and his wife was a wonderful woman. I called Jake immediately, and we spent an hour excitedly discussing nursery colors and baby names. A few months later, Jake and Sarah moved back to town. We want our child to grow up near family, Jake explained. I was overjoyed to have them close. Together, we threw ourselves into the family business. Jake's fresh ideas and Sarah's marketing expertise breathed new life into the company. We expanded our affordable housing projects, and soon, our homes were in high demand across the state. As I stood at the construction site of our newest development, watching the frames of future homes rise against the sky, I felt a sense of pride and contentment wash over me. My grandson, little Tommy, gurgled happily in my arms, reaching out to grab at my hard hat. See that, Tommy? I said softly. That's your great-grandpa's legacy. And someday, it'll be yours too. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the construction site, I smiled to myself. This was more than just a business, it was a new chapter, a fresh start, not just for me, but for generations to come. And I was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. I'm Camille, and this is the story of how my life took an unexpected turn. It all started when I was just a bright-eyed college student, full of dreams and ambitions. I was studying to become a financial analyst, and that's where I met him, Mark. Mark was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Smart, charming, and as ambitious as I was. We hit it off immediately, spending hours talking about our future plans and how we'd conquer the world together. It wasn't long before we decided to get married, right there in college. And so, our journey began. Mark set his sights on becoming a university professor, while I aimed for a position in a large investment company. We were young, in love, and ready to take on the world. After graduation, things started falling into place. Mark landed a teaching position at the university, and I secured a job as a financial analyst at a reputable investment firm. We were ecstatic, feeling like we were on the right path to achieving our dreams. In those early days, Mark's career took off like a rocket. He quickly became one of the most popular young professors at the university. Students loved his engaging teaching style, and his colleagues respected his intellect. I couldn't have been prouder. Meanwhile, I was quietly making progress in my own career. I threw myself into my work, analyzing financial data, creating reports, and slowly but surely climbing the corporate ladder. It wasn't as flashy as Mark's rising star, but I was content. As time went on, Mark became more involved in the university's social life. He was often invited to give interviews, attend faculty events, and spend extra time with his students. This meant he was frequently home late, but I understood. After all, we had agreed that our careers would come first. "Sorry I'm late again, Camille," he'd say, rushing through the door at 9 p.m. The students had so many questions after the lecture, and then the dean wanted to chat. I'd smile and say, "Don't worry about it. I'm just glad you're making such an impact." One evening, as we sat down for a rare dinner together, Mark looked at me curiously. "How's your job going, by the way? Still crunching numbers?" I hesitated for a moment. I had recently been promoted to senior analyst, but I hadn't mentioned it to Mark. Somehow, it felt wrong to steal his thunder. "Oh, same old," I replied with a shrug. "How about you? Any exciting news?" And just like that, the conversation shifted back to his world, his achievements, his plans. I listened and nodded, playing the role of the supportive wife perfectly. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something wasn't quite right. As the years rolled by, my career at the investment company began to take off. It wasn't an easy journey. Late nights, endless spreadsheets, and high-pressure meetings became my norm. But I loved every minute of it. One evening, I came home buzzing with excitement. "Mark, you won't believe it. I've been promoted to head of finance." Mark looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. "That's nice, honey. More responsibility, I suppose?" I felt my smile falter. "Well, yes. And a significant pay raise too." He nodded absently. "That's good. Hey, did I tell you about the paper I'm publishing next month?" And just like that, the conversation shifted back to his world. I pushed down my disappointment and listened attentively as he went on about his latest academic achievements. As time went on, I noticed a shift in our dynamic. My income had begun to surpass Mark's, and it seemed to bother him more than I expected. One night, after a few drinks, he brought it up. "Camille, I've been thinking. I need to find ways to earn more," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "It's not right that you're making more than me." I was taken aback. "Mark, what are you talking about? It's our money, our family budget. It doesn't matter who earns what." He scoffed. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one feeling inadequate." His words stung. I tried to reassure him, to make him understand that his worth wasn't tied to his paycheck, but it felt like talking to a brick wall. Meanwhile, our financial situation was improving rapidly. We bought a beautiful house, 2 cars, and even invested in some apartments. Our bank accounts were growing, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect power couple. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. Mark's jealousy of my achievements grew, casting a shadow over our relationship. He began to drink more, often coming home late smelling of alcohol. One night, he stumbled in, his eyes bloodshot. "Guess what, Camille? They picked some middle-aged woman for the dean position instead of me. That woman must be sleeping with the rector. It's the only explanation." I was shocked by his assumption. "Mark, that's a terrible thing to say. Maybe she was just more qualified?" He turned on me, his eyes flashing with anger. "What, you think I'm dumber than her? Is that it?" "Of course not," I backpedaled. "You're the smartest person I know." He laughed bitterly. "Right. Well, I'm smart enough to know how women get ahead in this world." Through the bedroom. The implication hung heavy in the air. I felt my cheeks burn with anger and hurt. "Is that what you think about me too?" But Mark had already turned away, stumbling towards the spare bedroom. "I'm sleeping here tonight," he mumbled, slamming the door behind him. I stood there in the hallway, feeling like I'd been slapped. Was this really the man I had married? The brilliant, ambitious partner I thought I knew? As weeks turned into months, Mark's behavior continued to worsen. His drinking became more frequent, and his bitterness about his career seemed to consume him. I tried everything I could think of to help him. "Mark, what about some personal development courses?" I asked one evening, watching him pour his 3rd glass of whiskey. "They might give you new perspectives," help you advance your career." His eyes flashed with anger. "Why don't you mind your own damn business?" "I don't need your charity or your condescension." I recoiled, hurt by his harsh words. "I'm just trying to help, Mark. I hate seeing you like this." "Then stop looking," he spat, storming out of the room. Meanwhile, my own career continued to flourish. I was developing financial models for new projects, making projections about investment returns, and my voice was becoming increasingly influential in major company decisions. But every success felt tainted by the knowledge of how it would affect Mark. One night, I had to stay late for an important meeting. I texted Mark to let him know, but in the rush of finalizing presentations and crunching last-minute numbers, I forgot to check if he'd responded. When I finally got home, well past midnight, I found Mark waiting in the living room. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and the smell of alcohol hit me like a wall. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded, his words slightly slurred. "I'm so sorry, Mark. The meeting ran late, and then we had to revise some figures, and..." He cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you were very busy. Staying late with your bosses, were you? All your promotions, your success, you're sleeping with them, aren't you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "How dare you?" I whispered, tears springing to my eyes. "How can you think so little of me?" "How else do you explain it?" he shouted. "Women like you, you're all the same. Using your bodies to get ahead while hardworking men like me get left behind." I couldn't bear to hear any more. "We'll talk about this in the morning when you're sober," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But Mark wasn't finished. He launched into a tirade, blaming me for everything: his stalled career, our childless state, his unfulfilled dreams. Every word was like a knife, cutting deep into the heart of our relationship. "Maybe we should see a marriage counselor," I suggested weakly, when he finally paused for breath. He laughed humorlessly. "A counselor won't fix this, Camille. I need to be alone. I can't stand the sight of you right now." With that, he grabbed his keys and stormed out, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our home. I didn't sleep that night. I called Mark repeatedly, but he never picked up. When morning came, I dragged myself to work, feeling like a shell of myself. I was distracted all day, my mind replaying Mark's cruel words over and over again. Then, in an ironic twist of fate, my boss called me into his office. "Camille," he said, smiling broadly, "I have some exciting news. We want you to represent the company at the International Investment Forum in Paris next month. It's a huge opportunity." I arrived home that evening with a mix of anticipation and dread. The house was quiet as I entered, and for a moment, I wondered if Mark was even home. Then I heard the clink of a glass from the living room. Taking a deep breath, I stepped in. Mark was there, nursing what looked like his usual whiskey. "Mark," I began cautiously. "Something happened at work today. I've been invited to represent our company at the International Investment Forum in Paris next month." I watched his face carefully, hoping to see a hint of pride or happiness for me. Instead, his expression hardened. "Paris? And you're going, I suppose?" "Well, yes. It's a huge opportunity for my career, for my future. For our future." He stood up abruptly. "No, this is about you choosing your job over your marriage. Again." "That's not fair," I protested. "You've never had a problem focusing on your career. Why is it different when it's mine?" "Because you're my wife," he shouted. "Your place is here, with me, not halfway across the world schmoozing with businessmen." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "My place? Are you serious right now?" Mark's face was red with anger. "Dead serious. You need to make a choice, Camille. Right now. It's either me or this trip. You can't have both." I stared at him, shocked by the ultimatum. This man, who I'd supported through every career move, every late night at the university, was now asking me to give up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And for what? To soothe his bruised ego? In that moment, looking at the stranger my husband had become, I made my decision. I'm going to Paris, Mark. His face contorted with rage. Without a word, he stormed out of the room. A few minutes later, he returned, slapping a stack of papers on the coffee table. "What's this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Divorce papers," he spat. "Since your career is clearly more important to you than our marriage, let's just end this charade." I picked up the papers with trembling hands. Part of me wanted to tear them up, to beg him to reconsider. But a stronger part, a part that had been silenced for too long, knew this was the right thing to do. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll take these with me to Paris. We can discuss it when I get back." With the divorce papers tucked safely in my briefcase and a heart heavy with conflicting emotions, I left for Paris the next morning. Mark didn't even bother to say goodbye. The International Investment Forum was everything I had hoped for and more. I found myself surrounded by brilliant minds from all over the world, discussing cutting-edge financial strategies and global economic trends. It was exhilarating. On the third day of the conference, I met Jacques, a charming French investor who took an interest in my work. "Your analysis of emerging markets is fascinating, Camille," he said over coffee. "Have you considered publishing your findings?" I laughed, somewhat embarrassed. "Oh, I don't know. I'm just doing my job." Jacques shook his head. Non, this is more than just a job. You have a gift, my dear. You shouldn't hide it." His words struck a chord in me. How long had I been downplaying my achievements, making myself smaller to fit into the role of the supportive wife? As the days passed, I found myself opening up, sharing ideas more freely, and even leading a few impromptu discussions. People listened to me, valued my opinions. It was intoxicating. As the forum drew to a close, I was approached by Sophia, the CEO of a prestigious international firm. "Camille," she said, her eyes twinkling with interest, "I've been watching your work this week. How would you feel about joining our team in London?" I was stunned. "London? I don't know what to say." Sophia smiled. "You don't have to decide right now. Take some time to think about it. But I believe you could do great things with us." As I packed my bags on the last night in Paris, my mind was reeling. The job offer in London, the divorce papers in my briefcase, the life I had left behind in the States, it all swirled in my head like a chaotic storm. I looked out the window at the twinkling lights of Paris. 2 weeks ago, I had arrived here feeling lost and conflicted. Now, I was leaving with a clearer sense of who I was and what I was capable of. As I boarded the plane back to the States, I clutched my briefcase close. Inside were not just the divorce papers, but notes from the conference, business cards from new connections, and the job offer from Sophia. It felt like I was carrying my past and my potential future, all in one hand. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Welcome aboard. We'll be departing for New York shortly." The familiar sights of home greeted me as I stepped out of the taxi, but everything felt different. I was different. With a deep breath, I unlocked the front door, bracing myself for whatever awaited me inside. To my surprise, Mark was there, sitting in the living room as if nothing had changed. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Welcome back," he said, his tone oddly casual. "How was Paris?" I hesitated, caught off guard by his apparent calm. "It was enlightening," I replied carefully. Mark nodded, then stood up and approached me. For a moment, I thought he might hug me, but he stopped short. "Listen, Camille, I've been thinking while you were gone. I think we got off on the wrong foot before you left." My heart raced. Was he about to apologize? To try and make amends? "I'm willing to forgive you," he continued, and my hope deflated instantly. "We can start over, put all this behind us. But there need to be some changes." I felt my jaw clench. "What kind of changes?" "For starters, you need to quit your job," he said, as if it was the most reasonable request in the world. It's clear that it's causing problems in our marriage. If you stay home, focus on our relationship, everything will be better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Quit my job? Mark, that's insane. My career is important to me. It's part of who I am. His face hardened. More important than our marriage? Than me? That's not fair, I protested. Why should I have to choose? Because I'm your husband, he shouted, his calm facade cracking. I'm sick of coming second to your ambition. It's time you remembered your place and started acting like a proper wife. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the frustration, the resentment, the pain of the past months came flooding out. My place? I spat back. And where exactly is that, Mark? Beneath you? Sacrificing everything I've worked for just to stroke your ego? His face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little thing. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I interrupted, my voice rising to match his. What about everything I've done for you? I've supported you, cheered you on, put your needs before mine for years. And this is how you repay me? With ultimatums and insults? Mark's eyes widened in shock. I had never spoken to him like this before. Always, I had been the peacemaker, the one to smooth things over. But not anymore. You know what? I said, reaching into my briefcase. I think you're right about one thing. There do need to be changes. I pulled out the divorce papers and slapped them on the coffee table. I've signed them. Now it's your turn. Mark stared at the papers, then back at me. You can't be serious, he sputtered. I've never been more serious in my life, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. We're done, Mark. I won't let you bully me or belittle me anymore. His face turned an alarming shade of red. You'll regret this, he hissed. I'll make sure you lose everything. Your job, your reputation, everything. I stood my ground, even as fear coursed through me. Go ahead and try. I'm not afraid of you anymore. With a roar of frustration, Mark swept the papers off the table and stormed out of the room. I heard the front door slam a moment later. As the silence settled around me, I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly weak. I had done it. After years of compromising, of making myself smaller, I had finally stood up for myself. But as the adrenaline faded, anxiety crept in. What would Mark do now? How far would he go to make good on his threats? The next morning, I did what I had been mentally prepared for a long time. The moment I stepped into Sarah's law office, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Sarah, my longtime friend turned lawyer, greeted me with a concerned smile. Camille, she said, gesturing for me to sit. I'm glad you called. Tell me everything. I took a deep breath and began recounting the events of the past few weeks, Mark's ultimatum, his threats, the divorce papers. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowing deeper with each detail. And now he's threatening to destroy my career, I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes serious. Camille, given the nature of his threats, I think we need to dig deeper. Have you considered hiring a private investigator to look into Mark's activities? I couldn't help it, I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, Sarah, I said, reaching for my bag, I'm way ahead of you on that one. I pulled out a thick folder and placed it on her desk. I hired a PI a few months ago. The results, well, they're not pretty. Sarah's eyebrows shot up as she opened the folder. We spent the next hour poring over its contents, and with each page, I watched Sarah's expression shift from shock to disbelief to something akin to triumph. The folder contained a damning collection of evidence against Mark. There were emails and recorded conversations revealing how he had manipulated and undermined his colleagues in his desperate bid to become dean. It was clear that his underhanded tactics had backfired spectacularly. The rector had gotten wind of his behavior and had deliberately chosen the woman Mark had so vehemently criticized for the position instead. But that wasn't the worst of it. As we delved deeper into the folder, We uncovered evidence of Mark's multiple affairs with his students. There were photos, videos, and even audio recordings that left no doubt about his infidelity. The university knew, I explained, my voice hollow. But they decided to cover it up to protect their reputation. Can you believe it? Sarah looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. Camille, this changes everything. With this evidence, we're not just going to win the divorce case. We're going to make sure Mark never threatens you or your career again. As we began to strategize, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had been carrying the burden of this knowledge alone for so long, afraid to use it, afraid of the consequences. But now, with Sarah by my side and a clear plan forming, I finally felt like I was taking control of my life again. The 2 weeks leading up to the trial were some of the most stressful of my life. Mark ramped up his campaign of intimidation. My phone buzzed constantly with his threats and demands. You'll be left with nothing, Camille, he snarled in one voicemail. I'll make sure you're penniless and disgraced. Another day, his tone shifted to a disturbing plea. Come back to me, baby. Be a good wife. Stay at home, and I'll forgive everything. Just do what I say. Each message made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to record and document every word. Sarah had advised me to keep a detailed log of his behavior, and I followed her instructions to the letter. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Mark for the first time in weeks. He looked confident, even smug, as he took his seat. His lawyer leaned over and whispered something in his ear, and they both chuckled. The proceedings began, and Mark's attorney painted a picture of me as a gold digger, someone who had used Mark for his status and now wanted to rob him blind. Your Honor, he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, Mrs. Thompson is simply jealous of my client's successful career. This divorce is nothing more than an attempt to cash in on his hard work. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to remain calm. Sarah squeezed my hand reassuringly. Then it was our turn. Sarah stood, her posture radiating confidence. Your Honor, we have evidence that paints a very different picture of this marriage and Mr. Thompson's character. What followed was a systematic dismantling of Mark's facade. Sarah presented the emails showing his underhanded tactics at work, the audio recordings of his threats against me, and finally, the damning evidence of his affairs with students. I watched as the color drained from Mark's face. He began to tremble, his eyes darting around the courtroom as if searching for an escape route. His lawyer looked shell-shocked, frantically whispering in Mark's ear. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as she reviewed the evidence. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold with disapproval. In light of this evidence, I find Mr. Thompson's behavior reprehensible, she declared. The court rules in favor of Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson will pay financial compensation for his infidelity, and all marital assets will be divided equally. The aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind. News of Mark's affairs spread quickly, and the university was forced to address the scandal. Despite their previous attempts to cover it up, they had no choice but to terminate Mark's contract. His reputation in academia was in tatters. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. My boss, impressed by my resilience and professional conduct throughout the ordeal, offered me the position of CFO. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Sarah. She grinned when she saw me. Look at you, CFO Thompson. How does it feel? I smiled back, feeling a warmth in my chest. It feels right, Sarah. For the first time in a long time, everything feels right. As we walked together, chatting about the future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The storm had passed, and I had not only survived, but emerged stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I was ready to face them head-on. My name's Amber, and I've got a story to tell you. I was married for years to Jake. We had a son, Tommy, who'd finished college and was working some office job downtown. He'd moved out a while back, renting his own place. Jake and I both worked at Steinman Financials. I was the deputy chief accountant, and he was in the finance department. Before we got hitched, we signed a prenup. It said if we ever split, whoever's name was on the property kept it, and we'd split the cash down the middle. Seemed fair at the time. We bought an apartment first, put it in my name. Then we got a house, put that in Jake's. We each had our own car. I always did the shopping for furniture and stuff. Jake hated it, even online shopping. So I kept all the receipts, being an accountant and all. Never knew when they might come in handy. Lately, Jake had been obsessing over our retirement. He'd spend hours poring over financial news, muttering about inflation and the rising cost of living. "Have you seen gas prices lately?" he'd grumble over breakfast. "And don't even get me started on groceries. How are we supposed to retire comfortably at this rate?" I'd try to reassure him, but he was like a dog with a bone. He'd research get-rich-quick schemes, always looking for that magic bullet. One day, he came home excited about day trading. "Amber, I think I found our ticket," he said, waving his tablet at me. "Look at these stock charts. If we play it right, we could double our money in no time." I shook my head. "Jake, that's too risky. We can't gamble with our savings." He sulked for days after that, but I stood firm. We needed stability, not high-risk ventures. One evening, Jake suggested we take a walk. The air was crisp, and the streets were quiet. As we strolled, he started talking about retirement again. "You know, Amber," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial, "there's a way we could make a few $100,000 easy. Set ourselves up for a cushy retirement." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? How's that?" He leaned in closer. "We could siphon some money from the company accounts. I can set up the transfers in finance, make them look legit. You just need to push them through in accounting." I stopped dead in my tracks. "Are you serious right now?" "That's theft, Jake. We could go to jail." He held up his hands, laughing suddenly. "Whoa, calm down. I was just joking. Testing your honesty, you know?" I relaxed a bit, but something felt off. "That's not funny, Jake. Don't joke about stuff like that." Sorry, he said, still chuckling. "Come on, let's head back." We walked home in silence, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something had changed, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Life went on as usual after that night, but something had shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it, but Jake seemed different. More distant, maybe. I tried to brush it off as stress from work. One day, our chief accountant quit unexpectedly. The company wasted no time in hiring a replacement. Her name was Vivian, and she waltzed into our office like she owned the place. Young, beautiful, and oozing confidence, she made quite an entrance. "Listen up, everyone," she announced on her first day. "Things are going to change around here. I expect nothing but the best from my team." Her eyes lingered on me a bit too long, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Something told me she wasn't happy about having me as her deputy. I was right. Over the next few weeks, Vivian made my life hell. She'd criticize my work constantly, making me redo reports multiple times for the tiniest errors. A few days later, during a management meeting, I noticed a glaring error in Vivian's calculations. I hesitated, not wanting to embarrass her, but my sense of duty won out. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. "I think there's a mistake in these numbers. The quarterly projections. They don't add up." The company director, Mr. Steinman, leaned forward. "Is this true, Vivian?" Vivian's face turned beet red. She snatched the report from me, scanned it quickly, then forced a smile. "It seems there was a small oversight. Thank you, Amber, for catching that." The words dripped with venom. As soon as the meeting ended, she cornered me in her office. "Listen here, you old hag," she snarled, all pretense of professionalism gone. "I don't care how long you've been here. I'm in charge now, and I'm going to make your life miserable until you quit." I stood my ground. I won't quit. I've done nothing wrong. She laughed, a cold, harsh sound. We'll see about that. You're on thin ice, Amber. One wrong move, and you're out. As I left her office, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I'd worked too hard to let some young upstart push me out. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Vivian seemed to be on a personal mission to make my life miserable. She'd pile work on my desk minutes before I was supposed to leave, criticize every little thing I did, and make snide comments in front of the whole team. I tried to keep my head down and do my job, but it was getting harder every day. Jake wasn't much help either. He'd come home late, barely talk during dinner, and spend most of his time glued to his phone. One particularly rough day, I decided to stay late to finish up some reports. The office was quiet, most people had gone home. As I was about to leave, I heard voices coming from Vivian's office. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer to listen. Everything's going according to plan, I heard Vivian say. That old bag won't know what hit her. A man's voice responded, but it was too low for me to make out the words. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Just then, the door started to open. I bolted, nearly dropping my purse in my haste to get to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of a man leaving Vivian's office. I couldn't see his face, but something about his build seemed familiar. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Who was Vivian talking to? What were they planning? And why did that man seem familiar? The next morning, I was called into Mr. Steinman's office. My stomach dropped as I saw Vivian standing there, a triumphant smirk on her face. Amber, Mr. Steinman began, his voice grave. I'm afraid we have to let you go. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? Why? Vivian has brought some concerns to my attention, he said, not meeting my eyes. She feels you're not performing up to our standards. I tried to argue, to explain how Vivian had been treating me unfairly, how she could be harming the company. But Mr. Steinman wouldn't budge. Vivian comes highly recommended, he said. A good friend of mine vouched for her. I trust his judgment. As I stood there, shell-shocked, Mr. Steinman's expression softened slightly. Look, Amber. I appreciate your years of service. I'll make sure you get the maximum possible bonus. It's usually reserved for upper management, but I think you've earned it. I nodded numbly, barely hearing his words. As I turned to leave, Vivian's voice stopped me. Don't forget to clear out your desk, she said sweetly. We wouldn't want you to leave anything important behind. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the malice behind her perfect smile. In that moment, I knew this was personal. But why? What had I ever done to her? When I got home, the house was empty. I called Jake, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. As I sat on our couch, staring at the walls, I felt lost. My job had been such a big part of my identity. Who was I without it? The next few months were a whirlwind. At first, I tried to enjoy my unexpected vacation. I threw myself into home projects, finally tackling that renovation I'd been putting off for years. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on our newly renovated living room, Jake came home with a gleam in his eye. Amber, he said, excitement clear in his voice, I've got an idea. Let's buy a new house. I blinked at him, paintbrush still in hand. What? We just finished renovating this one. He waved dismissively. Yeah, but think about it. With all the work you've done, we could sell this place for a fortune. Add in a bit more cash, and we could get a real luxury home. There's one for sale just a few blocks over, it's got a pool and everything. I hesitated. I don't know, Jake. We've put so much work into this place. Come on, Amber, he pressed. I've already got a buyer lined up for this house. All we need to do is sell your apartment, you know, the one we've been renting out, and we'll have more than enough. Something about his eagerness set off alarm bells in my head. but I pushed the feeling aside. This was Jake, my husband. If I couldn't trust him, who could I trust? Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a blur of real estate agents, paperwork, and packing. I sold my apartment, putting the money into our joint account as Jake suggested. It felt strange, letting go of a place that had been mine for so long, but Jake's enthusiasm was infectious. The day before we were set to move, Jake came home early. Hey, honey, he called out. I need you to do me a favor. Can you give the place a real deep clean? I'm bringing someone over tonight to see the house. I spent the day scrubbing and polishing, making sure every surface gleamed. By evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. The house looked better than it ever had. As I heard a car pull up outside, I smoothed down my hair and straightened my clothes. Time to make a good impression on our buyer. The front door opened, and I plastered on my best smile. But as Jake walked in, followed by his guest, my smile froze on my face. It was Vivian. She sauntered in, her eyes roaming over the house with a proprietary air. Then her gaze landed on me, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. Well, she drawled. Looks like the maid service has already been here. I stood there, stunned, as she turned to Jake. You were right, darling. It's perfect. Darling? I looked at Jake, praying for some kind of explanation. But the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Amber, he said, his voice cold and unfamiliar. I want a divorce. The room spun around me as I tried to process Jake's words. Divorce? And with Vivian? What's going on? I managed to choke out. Jake's face was set in a hard line. It's simple, Amber. I love Vivian. We want to be together. Vivian draped herself over Jake, her eyes gleaming with triumph. That's right, honey. I'm not just taking your job. I'm taking your husband too. I felt like I was in some kind of twisted nightmare. How long? I whispered. Jake at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. A while, he admitted. But that's not important now. What's important is that we part ways, amicably. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Amicably? You've been cheating on me, and you want amicable? He held up his hands. Look, I'm trying to be fair here. We'll split all the money in the joint accounts 50-50, just like the prenup says. I'll keep the house, since it's in my name. Clean break. My mind was reeling, but something clicked into place. The apartment sale, the rush to move, it had all been part of their plan. You manipulated me, I said, my voice growing stronger. You made me sell my apartment so you could get your hands on more cash. Jake shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. It's just business, Amber. Nothing personal. I saw red. Nothing personal? This is my life you're destroying. Vivian laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Oh, honey. Your life was already over. You're just too pathetic to realize it. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Fine, I said, my voice steady. I'll go. But I'm taking what's mine. Jake looked relieved. Sure, whatever. Just be out by morning. I nodded, then turned and walked calmly to the phone. Jake and Vivian watched, puzzled, as I dialed. Hello, Speedy Movers? I need a team here first thing in the morning. Yes, it's a full house move. Jake's face darkened. What are you doing? I smiled, a cold, hard smile that felt foreign on my face. I'm taking what's mine, Jake. Every single thing I bought for this house. Hope you and your mistress enjoy your empty love nest. The look of shock on their faces was almost worth the pain of the past few hours. Almost. As I headed upstairs to pack my personal belongings, I heard them arguing in fierce whispers. Let them fight, I thought. I had work to do. I spent the night sorting through papers, gathering every receipt I'd saved over the years. By morning, I had a clear inventory of everything that legally belonged to me. When the movers arrived, Jake tried to stop them, yelling about the prenup. But I calmly showed them the receipts and the clause in our agreement stating that individually purchased items remained the property of the buyer. Item by item, the house was emptied. Furniture, appliances, even the food in the fridge, all loaded into the moving van. Jake and Vivian watched in horrified silence as their perfect plan crumbled around them. As the last box was loaded, I turned to face them one last time. Jake looked shell-shocked, while Vivian's face was contorted with rage. "Enjoy your new life," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure it'll be everything you dreamed of." The next few days were a blur of activity. I rented a small storage unit for my belongings and checked into a modest hotel. My mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened and figure out my next move. On the second day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer, representing Jake. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice cold and professional, "I'm calling to inform you that your actions regarding the removal of property from your marital home were illegal. My client demands the immediate return of all items." I laughed, surprising even myself with how steady my voice was. "I don't think so. Everything I took, I purchased. I have the receipts to prove it." The lawyer paused, clearly not expecting this response. "Nevertheless, the prenuptial agreement. The prenup states that individually purchased items remain the property of the buyer," I interrupted. "You're welcome to review it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have my own legal matters to attend to." I hung up, my heart pounding. I knew this was far from over, but I felt a small thrill of victory. For once, I was fighting back. That evening, I called my son, Tommy. I hadn't told him about the divorce yet, and my heart ached at the thought of breaking the news. "Mom," he answered, his voice concerned. "Is everything okay?" I'd been trying to reach Dad, but he's not answering. I took a deep breath. "Tommy, there's something I need to tell you. Your father and I, we're getting a divorce." There was a long silence on the other end. "Then, what? Why? What happened?" I explained as best I could, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice, for Tommy's sake. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "What can I do? Do you need a place to stay?" I smiled, grateful for his support. "No, honey, I'm okay for now. But there is something you could do for me." I explained my plan, feeling a twinge of guilt for involving Tommy. But I needed someone I could trust completely, and who better than my own son? Tommy agreed without hesitation. "I'll do whatever you need, Mom." "Dad, he's made his choice. I'm on your side." As I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. Sadness for the family we once were, anger at Jake's betrayal, but also a fierce determination. I had been knocked down, but I wasn't out. Not by a long shot. I pulled out a notebook and began to write, outlining my plan. Jake and Vivian thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. I was going to take back everything they had stolen from me, my job, my dignity, and my future. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Tommy, true to his word, moved back into Jake's house, claiming he wanted to support his father during this difficult time. Jake, caught off guard by this unexpected show of filial loyalty, welcomed him with open arms. Little did Jake know that Tommy was my eyes and ears inside the house. Every night, we'd talk on the phone, and he'd fill me in on what he'd discovered. "Mom, you won't believe this," Tommy whispered one night. "I managed to get into Dad's computer. There are emails between him and Vivian, going back months. They'd been planning this for a long time." My heart clenched, but I pushed the pain aside. "What else did you find?" Tommy's voice dropped even lower. "There are some weird financial documents. I don't understand most of it, but it looks shady." I felt a spark of hope. This could be the break I needed. "Can you make copies?" "Already done," Tommy said. I'll drop them off at your hotel tomorrow." True to his word, Tommy delivered a USB drive filled with documents the next day. As I pored over the files, my accountant's brain kicked into high gear. The more I read, the more my suspicions grew. There were discrepancies in the company's financial reports, money moving between accounts that shouldn't exist. And at the center of it all were Jake and Vivian's names. I remembered Jake's joke about embezzling money from the company. It seemed it wasn't a joke after all. Armed with this information, I knew it was time to make my move. I called my lawyer, explaining what I had found. "This is serious, Amber," he said, his voice grave. "If what you're saying is true, we're looking at major fraud. But we need more concrete evidence." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. What do you suggest?" "We need to get the company involved," he said. "If we can prove that Jake and Vivian have been stealing from Steinman Financials, it could change everything in your divorce proceedings." The next day, I marched into Steinman Financials, my head held high. As I walked through the familiar corridors, I could feel the stares of my former colleagues. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, but I ignored them all. I knocked on Mr. Steinman's door, my heart pounding. "Come in," his voice called out. As I stepped into his office, his eyes widened in surprise. "Amber, what are you doing here?" I took a deep breath. "Mr. Steinman, I need to talk to you. It's about Jake and Vivian. And it's about your company." For the next hour, I laid out everything I had discovered. The suspicious transfers, the hidden accounts, the discrepancies in the reports. Mr. Steinman's face grew increasingly pale as I spoke. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "Get me the head of security and our legal team. Now." He looked back at me, his expression a mix of anger and gratitude. "Amber, I owe you an apology. And a thank you. If what you're saying is true, you may have saved this company from disaster." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity at Steinman Financials. Mr. Steinman, acting on the information I'd provided, ordered an urgent audit of the company's accounts. The results were shocking, even to me. The auditors confirmed what I'd suspected: money was indeed being siphoned from the company's accounts to unknown destinations. The total amount stolen was staggering, approximately $400,000. I felt sick to my stomach thinking about how long this must have been going on right under my nose. A large-scale investigation followed, involving not just the company's internal team, but also external forensic accountants and law enforcement. As the evidence mounted, there was no doubt left: Jake and Vivian were guilty of extensive fraud. I watched from the sidelines as their world came crashing down. Police officers arrived at the office one morning, leading both Jake and Vivian away in handcuffs. Their property and accounts were seized, and a criminal case was opened for economic crimes. Despite the satisfaction of seeing justice served, the aftermath was messy and painful. Because of the prenuptial agreement we'd signed years ago, I couldn't reclaim the money from the apartment I'd sold. Instead, those funds, along with our other joint accounts, were split equally between us. The house, being in Jake's name, remained his property. However, my lawyer fought hard, and we managed to secure some victories. I received financial compensation from Jake amounting to 50% of our house's value, plus lifelong alimony. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was something. But I wasn't done. I went after Vivian too, demanding compensation for the trauma and financial loss I'd suffered due to her actions. The court sided with me, ordering her to pay over $35,000 in damages. In the end, Jake and Vivian received suspended sentences for their fraud. All their property was confiscated, leaving them deep in debt. The court also barred them from holding any senior positions in the future. Their careers, like their reputations, were in tatters. As I left the courthouse after the final hearing, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, but also hope. The past few months had been a nightmare, but I'd come through it stronger than ever. I'd uncovered a major fraud, reclaimed my reputation, and secured my financial future. With a substantial amount of money in my bank account, I decided it was time for a fresh start. After weeks of searching, I found the perfect place, a small house with a cozy garden on the outskirts of town. It was nothing like the lavish home I'd shared with Jake, but as I stood on the porch, looking out at the neat rows of flowers and vegetables, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I threw myself into renovating the house, making it truly mine. I painted the walls in warm, cheerful colors, installed bookshelves for my growing collection, and set up a small home office overlooking the garden. Tommy visited often, helping me with the heavier work and just keeping me company. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing I'd installed, sipping lemonade, he turned to me with a smile. "You know, Mom, I'm really proud of you," he said. "After everything that happened, look at you now. You're amazing." I felt my eyes well up with tears. "Thank you, honey. That means more to me than you know." As I settled into my new life, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Steinman. "Amber," he said, his voice warm. "I hope you're doing well. I have a proposition for you." It turned out that after the dust had settled from the fraud scandal, Steinman Financials was in need of a new chief accountant. And they wanted me. "Your work in uncovering the fraud was exemplary," Mr. Steinman said. "We need someone with your skills and integrity. Plus, there's a substantial bonus in it for you, as a thank you for saving the company from ruin." I was speechless. After a moment, I found my voice. "Mr. Steinman, I don't know what to say. Thank you. I'd be honored." My first day back at the office was surreal. As I walked through the doors, not as a disgraced former employee, but as the new chief accountant, I held my head high. My former colleagues greeted me with smiles and congratulations. Mr. Steinman met me in the lobby, a broad smile on his face. To my surprise, he pulled me into a hug. "Welcome back, Amber," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're lucky to have you." As I settled into my new role, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. I was doing work I loved, surrounded by people who respected me. The financial bonus was generous, allowing me to pay off my new house and set aside a nest egg for the future. In the evenings, I'd return to my little house, tend to my garden, and relax on the porch swing. Sometimes Tommy would join me, other times I'd enjoy the solitude. I started taking classes at the local community college, art, literature, even a cooking course. For the first time in years, I was focusing on my own growth and happiness. Hey there, I'm Ava, the artist that all the newspapers and critics have been talking about for the past 6 months. I live in a cozy apartment with canvases piled up like old newspapers in every corner. Today, I'm dragging my feet at another one of those art exhibitions where people with more money than sense pretend to understand art. But that's where the cash flows from, and I need that to keep doing what I love. I'm setting up my corner, hanging my pieces, when this guy walks in. Looks sharp, suit and all, and he's scanning the room like he's shopping for more than just art. I peg him for another rich snob at first. His eyes stop at my biggest piece, and there's a pause. Then he strolls over, all casual like he's walking into a friend's house uninvited. "That's quite a storm you've captured," he remarks, pointing at my painting of a tumultuous sea. "Yup, it's a mess all right," I reply, wiping my hands on my jeans. Not really in the mood to entertain. He chuckles, a deep sound that seems genuine. "I'm Ethan," he extends his hand, not a speck of pretension. That takes me off guard. "Ava," I shake his hand, firm and brief. "Got tired of painting still lives and sunsets. Thought I'd throw some real life onto the canvas." "That's refreshing," he nods, glancing back at the painting. "It's raw, powerful." I'm about to thank him when he asks, "Got a minute to talk about your work? Maybe over coffee?" Coffee turns into sitting at this overpriced cafe across the street, Ethan sipping his fancy espresso while I stick to plain black coffee. He talks art like he knows it, really knows it. Turns out he owns a couple of galleries and isn't just some suit. "So, you make a living just throwing paint around?" he teases, eyebrow raised. Beats wearing a tie, I shoot back, smiling despite myself. We talk about everything, art, music, crappy movies. He's easy to talk to, and I find myself opening up about my dream of making it big without selling out. He listens, really listens. You're not like the usual artists I meet, he admits. You're not all airs and graces. You're real, like your paintings. Thanks, I guess, I say, still wary of compliments. Most guys don't look past the surface, you know? They see a girl who likes to paint, not someone trying to make something of herself. Well, I see someone talented. And it's not just about the art. It's about the artist. You've got something, Ava. Don't let anyone tell you different. The afternoon fades into evening, and I realize I've enjoyed myself. He walks me back to the exhibition, and before we part, he hands me his card. Think about what I said, Ava. Maybe we can talk more, set up something for your work. No pressure, just think about it. Yeah, maybe, I take the card, surprised at myself for even considering it. He gives me a small wave and heads back into the crowd, leaving me with a weird feeling in my gut. Like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just another pointless chat. Life's funny, ain't it? 1 minute you're slinging paint on a canvas in some dingy studio, and the next, you're being whisked off your feet by a guy who actually gets you. That's been my ride with Ethan. A year of surprises, and not the bad kind. We found ourselves at this tiny Italian place he likes, tucked away in a side street where you'd miss it if you blinked. The kind of spot where the owner knows your name and the food tastes like an old family recipe. Ethan's all smiles tonight, more than usual, and I can't help but feel a buzz in the air. He's fidgeting, which ain't like him at all. I'm about to call him out when he clears his throat, all serious like he's about to deliver the evening news. Ava, I've been thinking, he starts, and I brace myself. Thinking can lead anywhere with Ethan. Yeah? About what? I keep it cool, sipping my wine like it's just another Tuesday. About us. About this thing we've got going. He pauses, searching my face for clues. I ain't giving anything away just yet. I lean in, eyebrows up. And? He takes a deep breath, and then he's down on one knee, right there between the antipasto and the cannoli. I almost spit my wine out. Ava, will you marry me? He's holding up this ring, simple but perfect, and for a hot second, I'm speechless. I blink, making sure I'm not 3 glasses deep into a wine dream. Ethan, are you for real right now? As real as it gets. He's grinning, and damn, he looks hopeful. Hell, yes, I laugh, more out of shock than anything. Yeah, Ethan, I'll marry you. The whole restaurant's watching now, clapping, and the owner's bringing over another bottle of wine on the house. Ethan slides the ring on my finger, and it fits like it's always been there. We're laughing and kissing, and for once, I'm not thinking about tomorrow or the next day. Just here, now. He's all lit up, eyes shining. I wasn't sure what you'd say. Really? Come on, when have I ever managed to say no to you? I tease, but I'm riding the high, too. It's just, you're not the typical girl, Ava. You've got this fire, and I never wanted to be the guy to put that out. He's sincere, and it hits me hard, right in the feels. Ethan, you're about the only person who hasn't tried to. I admit, feeling that weird warm fuzz that comes with too much truth and just enough wine. We talk plans, dream big about what comes next. Maybe a small wedding, something low-key, but real nice. We're both grinning like idiots by the time we leave, the cool night air doing nothing to sober the buzz. The wedding was a blast, a real fairy tale kind of day. There I was, in a white dress that made me feel like I was floating on air. Even Jane, my agent and old pal, was all teary-eyed, telling me how she was kindly jealous and throwing around big smiles. It felt like everything was falling right into place. Life with Ethan started out like we were living some kind of dream. We set up house together, and those early days felt full of promise. I was on fire creatively, spending long hours in my studio across town, splashing my thoughts and moods across canvases that just kept piling up. Ethan was all praises then, always saying how amazed he was at what I could create and how hard I worked. But you know how it is, the honeymoon phase doesn't last forever. It wasn't long before I started noticing a shift in Ethan. At first, it was just little signs, like him coming off a bit sharp over dinner or fussing over small stuff that didn't matter. Then it got more intense, especially about my paintings. "Why don't you just sell some of these, Ava?" he'd start in, his tone more accusing than questioning. "You've got dozens just gathering dust here." "They're for the upcoming exhibition, Ethan," I'd explain, trying to keep my cool. "It's important, you know this. It could really kick things up a notch for my career." But he wouldn't have it. "Look, we could use the money, Ava. And honestly, how many more do you need to keep?" Things got even more complicated when Jane started dropping by more often. I thought she'd have my back, but it turned out she was singing the same tune as Ethan. One afternoon, she came in laughing about something Ethan had said. "He's right, you know. We could practically wallpaper our houses with all the paintings you refuse to sell." Her words, meant as a joke, stung. I let it slide once, twice. But when it became their little running gag, I couldn't hold back any longer. One day, I pulled Jane aside after Ethan had cracked another one of those jokes at my expense, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Jane, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not okay with the jokes. And I'm not okay with you teaming up against me about my work." She looked taken aback, her face flushing with embarrassment or maybe guilt. "Ava, I didn't realize it was bothering you that much." "It is. And it stops now, or I'm finding a new agent," I said, not wanting to mince words. "Ava, come on, you know I was just messing around." Jane tried to smooth things over, her usual confidence slipping. "I'm sorry, really. It won't happen again." From then on, things were a bit tense. Ethan kept pushing, and Jane kept her distance, maybe out of guilt, maybe just laying low. I threw myself into my work even harder, partly because it was all I had left that felt right. I wasn't just creating art anymore, I was holding on to the only part of my life that still made sense. Suddenly the smell of paint and thinner, once my allies, had turned into my enemies. Just stepping into my studio made my stomach churn. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe a bug I caught, but when the morning started with me hugging the toilet, I knew it was more than just stress or bad takeout. So, I did the one thing that scared me more than a blank canvas. I bought a pregnancy test. Waiting for those lines to appear felt longer than waiting for paint to dry. And there it was, a positive. My heart was racing, a mix of fear and something like joy. I was going to be a mom. I couldn't wait to tell Ethan. I imagined him being thrilled, picturing us as one of those happy families in diaper commercials. But reality has a lousy way of knocking the wind out of you. I told him that evening, the positive test in my hand like some kind of peace offering. His face dropped, and not in a good way. "Ava, we can't do this right now. This is the worst timing," Ethan blurted out, his words like ice water down my back. "What do you mean, we can't do this?" "It's happening, Ethan. It's real," I said, my voice shaky. "We need to get rid of it. We're not ready to be parents." He was almost cold, detached. My heart felt like it was cracking right down the middle. "No, I can't do that. I won't," I said, finding strength I didn't know I had. "If you decide to keep it, don't expect anything from me." His words were a slap, harsh and stinging. I broke down after he left the room. I've never felt so alone. My whole life was about creating, and here I was, creating a life, and the man I loved was turning his back on it, and on me. I called Jane, hoping for some support, some understanding. But even she couldn't mask her hesitation. "Congrats, Ava, but are you sure about this? Maybe Ethan's right. This could really change things for you, for your art." She tiptoed around the edges of what she really wanted to say. "I didn't call to debate this, Jane. I thought you, of all people, would get it." I hung up, feeling the rift between us widen. With the studio now a no-go zone due to my sudden aversion to paint smells, I spent more time outside, walking in the park, trying to clear my head. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was on my own in this. Ethan became more distant each day, obsessed only with my work, or the lack of it. "When is your exhibition? When are you going to start selling again?" he would ask, not even trying to hide his frustration. I'd snap back. "It's on hold, okay? Can't you see I'm dealing with a bit more than just paintings here?" But he didn't see. Or he didn't want to. Our conversations turned into arguments, quick and sharp like a brush flicking too much paint off its bristles. I was alone, truly alone, but also determined. I had a new life growing inside me, and like my paintings, I was going to see it through, no matter how tough the audience. After weeks of battling morning sickness and steering clear of my studio, the day I felt like myself again, I couldn't wait to get back to my sanctuary. The smell of paint no longer made my stomach turn, and I was eager to lose myself in my work once more. But as soon as I stepped in, something felt off. A quick glance around, and I noticed gaps where there shouldn't be. Some of my paintings were missing. Panic knotted in my chest. I racked my brain. Had I moved them? Sold them and forgot? No way, I would remember selling my own work. I darted to the old PC tucked in the corner, the one hooked up to the security cameras I had installed years back when a local punk thought it'd be fun to tag the warehouse. I never thought I'd need them for anything more than scaring off vandals. Fast forward through hours of nothing, and then, there he was, Ethan, looking sketchy as hell. He was lifting my paintings, one by one, and then walking out. My heart raced. What the hell was he doing? Was he selling my work on the side? But why? I sat back, feeling like I'd been punched. I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed more info. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of a private investigator I'd found online, someone with good reviews who didn't look like they'd spill the beans for a quick buck. "Yeah, I need someone tailed. My husband. I think he's up to something bad," I told the PI, my voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Understood. We'll start following him today and keep you updated," the PI assured me. For the next 3 weeks, I was on edge, pretending everything was normal around Ethan while waiting for the investigators' calls. He updated me regularly, and the news wasn't good. Ethan was neck-deep in debt, something about bad business deals and loans coming due. It turned out he was using my paintings to keep his creditors at bay. The worst part? Jane was in on it. The two of them were a team, selling my originals and replacing them with fakes. The PI even got photos of them together, laughing, looking way too cozy. My friend and my husband, stabbing me in the back while smiling to my face. When I was alone, I'd replay their conversations in my mind. "I told you, Ava will never notice. She trusts us completely." Ethan's voice, smug and confident. "Yeah, she's too stupid to notice anything even under her nose," Jane's reply, dripping with disdain. Their betrayal burned in my chest, a constant ache. But I pushed the pain down and focused on my plan. I couldn't tip them off that I knew. I started checking each of my paintings, comparing them to the photos I had on my computer. One by one, I identified the fakes. They were good, but not good enough to fool the artist's eye. I marked each replaced painting discreetly, deciding to keep this to myself until the exhibition. I wanted to expose them publicly, to show everyone their true faces. The day of the exhibition finally arrived. I was a bundle of nerves and anticipation. Everything had to be perfect, not just the art on the walls, but the performance I was about to put on. Dressed elegantly, accentuating my now noticeable pregnancy, I felt powerful, like a storm ready to break. The gallery was buzzing with guests when I arrived. Reporters, art critics, potential buyers, and everyday art lovers filled the space. Ethan and Jane were there too, mingling, laughing, looking like the picture of innocence. They had no idea what was coming. I took the podium, my hands steady, despite the turmoil inside. "Thank you, everyone, for being here today," I began, my voice clear and confident. This exhibition was a labor of love, which, given recent personal challenges, was not easy to prepare. I am grateful for all the inspiration from my fans and the support from the community. The room filled with applause, and I nodded, acknowledging the support. But as the clapping died down, I continued. However, I must disclose something important before we proceed. A hush fell over the room. Cameras raised in anticipation, recording every second. I apologize, but many of my paintings here are fakes. Gasps echoed through the hall, and murmurs swirled like a gust of wind picking up leaves. The person responsible for this betrayal is someone I trusted deeply, my husband, Ethan, and his accomplice, my agent and supposed friend, Jane. The shock was palpable. Ethan's face drained of color, and Jane's eyes widened in panic. I have proof of their deceit. I signaled to the tech guy, and the screen behind me lit up, showing video footage from the workshop. There was Ethan, sneaking out with my original paintings, and then replacing them with fakes. The crowd erupted in whispers. I let them soak it in before I played the audio recordings, the nail in the coffin. Ethan's voice filled the room, mocking my ignorance and detailing their scheme to use my art to settle his debts. Jane's laughter, cruel and dismissive, followed. I was a fool, but not because I didn't know, I said into the mic, my voice firm. But because I trusted without question. That ends today. Reporters swarmed around Ethan and Jane, firing questions faster than bullets. They stumbled over their words, their excuses feeble and unsatisfying. As they tried to leave, the police entered, moving through the crowd and straight to them. They read their rights and cuffed them, all while cameras flashed and recorded every moment. The room erupted into applause, not just for the drama, but for the resilience I'd shown. I stood there, hand on my belly, feeling my daughter kick as if in approval. The fallout from the exhibition scandal turned my life upside down, but this time in a good way. My paintings, once confined to my studio and the occasional gallery wall, were now in high demand. Prices for my work skyrocketed as art lovers clamored to own a piece of the story. With the rush of new attention, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Interviews, talk show invites, and gallery offers flooded in. It was overwhelming but exhilarating. "You're a hot commodity, Ava." My new agent, Mike, chuckled over the phone. He was a straight shooter, recommended by a fellow artist who swore by his honesty. "We've got to strike while the iron's hot." Amidst the chaos, the most profound change came quietly, a baby girl with her mother's stubborn streak and her father's deep blue eyes. Holding her for the first time, I felt a surge of protectiveness. "I'll call you Mia," I whispered. She was my new beginning. The divorce from Ethan was messy, but swift. My lawyer was a bulldog, fighting tooth and nail for every penny of compensation and child support. "He'll pay for what he did, Ava. Not just in cash, he had promised me early on, and he delivered." The day Ethan and Jane were sentenced was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. I sat in the front row, Mia cradled against my chest, a silent observer to her parents' past unfolding. Ethan couldn't meet my gaze. He and Jane looked small, deflated, gone was the arrogance and the smug smiles. When the judge handed down the sentence, short prison terms but long-lasting public disgrace, they merely nodded, accepting their fate without a word. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Mia grew quick as a flash, giggling and babbling her way into everyone's hearts. My studio became my sanctuary once again, only this time with a crib in the corner and baby toys scattered among paint tubes. Mike was a godsend, handling the business side with a deft touch that left me free to create. "You've got a gallery opening in New York next month," he informed me one afternoon as I dabbed at a canvas, Mia playing at my feet. "New York, huh? Sounds like a big deal," I mused, not pausing my brushstrokes. And so, with my past tucked away like the darker colors on my palette, I painted my future in bright, bold strokes. Mia's laughter filled the air, a sweeter melody than any acclaim or applause. It's been 3 years since the dust settled on the chaos that was my old life. 3 years, And I've carved out a space for myself and Mia that's about as peaceful as it gets. We're living in a cozy house with a sprawling backyard where Mia can run around and I can breathe easy. My art? It's taken off in ways I only dreamed of. Collaborating with galleries, my paintings fetching prices that make me do a double take, it's all still a bit surreal. I was in the middle of setting up a new canvas in the makeshift studio I rigged up in the garage when my phone buzzed. The screen flashed Ethan's name. Hesitating just a second, I answered, bracing myself. Ava, it's Ethan. I've been thinking a lot since everything. I'm out now, and I want to apologize, Ava. Truly. And I was hoping. You're hoping what, Ethan? Hoping I've forgotten everything? Hoping I'd just let you waltz back into our lives? I cut him off, not needing to hear the rest. No, it's not like that. I don't expect anything, Ava. I want to see Mia. I want to be a part of her life. I'm her father. I sighed, a heavy, tired sound. You lost the right to call yourself that when you decided your debts were more important than your family. I know I messed up, I do. I've changed, Ava. I have. He pleaded, his voice cracking a bit. Good for you, Ethan. Really. But Mia's doing just fine without you. We both are. You're not part of this life anymore. I wasn't just throwing words, I meant every one of them. Can I at least send her something? For her birthday or Christmas? His voice was smaller now, almost lost. You can send it to Mike, my agent. He'll make sure it's appropriate before it gets to her. That's the best I can offer you. Another pause, then a quiet, okay, thank you, Ava. Goodbye, Ethan. I hung up before he could say anything else, my hand shaking just a bit as I put the phone down. Mia came barreling into the studio then, all giggles and energy, her hair a mess from playing outside. Mommy, look what I made. She held up a drawing, a swirl of colors that only a child's mind could dream up. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, pulling her into a hug, the earlier phone call already fading from my mind. Absolutely beautiful. Life had a funny way of balancing out. For every bad memory, there was a moment like this, so full of joy and innocence it made everything else seem small. I was making art, raising my daughter, and living a life I had fought hard to reclaim. No, it wasn't always easy, but it was ours, and it was filled with more love and laughter than I ever thought possible. The galleries kept calling, Mia kept growing, and I kept painting, our days a canvas that we filled together, bold and bright. Ethan was just a shadow, a part of a past chapter that was closed and done. As Mia tugged on my hand, pulling me back to her world of make-believe and masterpieces, I knew we were exactly where we needed to be. In a home filled with love, light, and the laughter of a little girl who knew she was the heart of her mother's universe. My name's Gina. I used to be a figure skating coach, before my life took a whole different turn. It was back at the rink where I spent most of my days, either gliding on ice or teaching kids how to stand on their skates without falling flat. It was a regular Tuesday morning when I first saw Tom. He was at the rink, obviously out of his element, clutching the railing like it was the only thing between him and a frozen grave. His niece, Lily, who was about 7, zipped around him, her laughter echoing off the cold walls. Hey, need a hand? I skated over to Tom, amused by his cautious stance. He looked up, relief washing over his face. Yeah, thanks. I'm Tom, and this is Lily, he gestured to the whirlwind niece of his who was now attempting a spin. Gina, I introduced myself, offering him a smile. And don't worry, you're not the first adult to look like they're auditioning for Bambi on ice around here. He chuckled, easing up a bit. That obvious, huh? I'm just trying to keep up with her, he nodded towards Lily. But I swear, she's more at home here than I am in my office. We chatted more as I gave him a few tips on how to skate without clinging to the sides. He was quick to learn, or maybe he was just trying really hard not to embarrass himself in front of his niece. Either way, it was fun watching him get the hang of it. Uncle Tom, look. Lily called out, doing a little jump. I laughed. You've got a natural there. Ever thought of getting her into lessons? Tom glanced at me, then back at Lily, who was now skating towards us. I've thought about it. Do you give lessons? Sure do, I replied. I teach kids her age all the time. She'd fit right in. He seemed to think it over as he watched Lily join us, her face flushed with cold and excitement. What do you think, kiddo? Want to learn some cool tricks? Lily's eyes lit up. Yes, please, Uncle Tom? He nodded, looking back at me. Guess we're signing up then. From that day, Tom started bringing Lily to her lessons regularly. We got to talking more and more. He was funny in a dry sort of way, and I liked that. He'd hang around during the lessons, sometimes even lacing up a pair of skates and trying a few moves himself. One day, after the rink had emptied and it was just the two of us left, he asked me out. It was straightforward, no fancy lines, just a simple, "Wanna grab dinner sometime?" That dinner led to many more, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Life was simple, filled with laughter, chilly mornings at the rink, and quiet evenings out. Life after marrying Tom seemed like it settled into a comfortable pattern faster than I thought possible. Moving out of my small apartment and into a house with Tom felt like the first real grown-up thing I'd ever done. We filled it with furniture, laughter, and eventually, the cries and giggles of our kids. Tom's family was a big part of our lives. His mom, Janet, and dad, Mike, were over so often it felt like they lived with us half the time. Janet loved to come over and fuss over everything, from the garden to my cooking, which she couldn't praise enough even though I knew I was no master chef. "You've got to teach me how to make this lasagna, Gina," Janet would say nearly every time, her voice loud and filled with genuine enthusiasm as she helped herself to another hefty slice. "It's no secret recipe, Janet. Just followed the instructions on the box and added a pinch of love." I'd joke back, and she'd chuckle, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Tom's sister, Sarah, and her daughter, Lily, were regulars too. Lily was growing so fast, and watching her and my own kids play together brought a sort of peace and happiness that was hard to describe. One Sunday, while the kids were sprawled on the living room floor with their coloring books and toys, Sarah and I sipped coffee in the kitchen. "You've made a nice life here, Gina," Sarah noted, her tone a mix of admiration and a hint of something else, maybe wistfulness. "I guess we did, huh?" I responded, leaning back in my chair. "It's noisy, messy, and chaotic, but it's ours." Sarah laughed, her voice echoing slightly in the kitchen. "That's family. Tom's really stepped up, hasn't he? Being a dad suits him." I smiled, thinking about how Tom had indeed taken to fatherhood with a surprising amount of grace. "He's great with them. Still, he's been working so much lately." "Yeah, he mentioned the new project at work. Sounds like a beast," Sarah sympathized, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Tom had been staying late at work more often, coming home after the kids were in bed. I understood, his job was demanding, and he was the sole breadwinner now that I had quit working to raise the kids. That night, after the kids were asleep and I was folding laundry, Tom came home. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled and his hair a mess. "You look like you've been through a war," I said, half joking as I walked over to help him with his coat. Tom forced a smile, his eyes tired. "Feels like it sometimes. These clients are driving me up the wall." We ate in a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone so well that words aren't always necessary. But underneath that comfort, a thread of worry nagged at me. Tom was pulling away, bit by bit, lost in his work. Later, as we lay in bed, I turned to him, the moonlight casting shadows across our room. "You okay? You've been really distant lately. Talk to me." Tom turned to face me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I'm just tired, Gina. It's this project. It won't be like this forever, I promise." As sleep claimed me, I hoped that he was right, that work was just a temporary wedge and nothing more. Because deep down, I feared what it might mean if our little bubble of domestic bliss burst. When I found out I was pregnant with our third child, it was a mix of joy and apprehension. I told Tom the news one evening after he'd come home late from work, looking as weary as ever. "Tom, I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant," I said, my voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. He looked up, surprise etching his face before it softened into a smile. "Really? Wow, that's great, Gina," he said, and for a moment, he seemed genuinely happy, the tired lines around his eyes smoothing out. But the smile didn't reach his eyes, and he sank into the chair as if the weight of another responsibility was too much to stand. "It's wonderful news," I continued, trying to gauge his reaction. "But, Tom, I'm gonna need you more at home. With 3 kids, it's gonna be a lot." Tom's face changed then. The brief joy faded as reality hit him. "More at home, Gina? You know my work's crazy right now. How am I supposed to?" "I know, but it's our family, Tom. It's your kids too," I interrupted, feeling a sting of frustration. "I do my part, Gina," he snapped back, his voice raising. "I work all day to provide for us. I need to rest, not come home to more work and screaming kids." I swallowed hard, watching him walk away, feeling more alone than ever. His words hurt, but I tried to shake it off, telling myself he was just stressed. The months that followed were tough. My belly grew, and so did the distance between Tom and me. He started using work as an excuse to stay away, even more, coming home only to lock himself in his office, or leaving before dawn for so-called business trips. When our third child, Mia, was born, I hoped it might bring us back together, that seeing her tiny face would remind Tom of what was important. But it only seemed to drive him further away. He barely looked at Mia, and when he did, it was with a hollow kind of detachment. "Tom, won't you hold her?" I asked one evening, when he was actually home. I held Mia out to him, her little eyes blinking sleepily. Tom glanced at her, then back at his phone. "I've got to take this call," he said, turning away. It felt like a punch to the gut. I nodded, saying nothing, and turned back to Mia, whispering apologies into her soft hair. Days turned into weeks, and Tom's absences grew longer. When he was home, his irritation flared at the smallest noise, and I felt like I was constantly smoothing things over, keeping the kids quiet, keeping the house calm, all while my own heart was anything but. The day was just about winding down when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and hesitating only a moment, I answered it while trying to soothe Mia, who was fussy after her nap. "Mrs. Thompson?" a deep voice inquired on the other end. It sounded formal, serious. "Yes, this is she. How can I help you?" "This is Paul Richards, the director at your husband's company. I'm sorry to disturb you, but we've been trying to reach Tom all day. We urgently need him back at the office." A cold prickle ran down my spine. "Oh, he's on a business trip right now. Won't be back till next week," I responded, my voice steady, despite the sudden thump of my heart. "That's impossible, Mrs. Thompson." Paul's voice was confused and a bit impatient. "We don't have him down for any business trips. And in fact, he took personal leave saying he needed to help at home with the new baby." My hand tightened around the phone. There must be some mistake. He left for a trip a few days ago." There was a pause on the other end, and then Paul spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I see. If you do hear from him, please have him contact me directly. It's urgent." I hung up, the silence in the room now screaming loud. Tom's lies were unraveling faster than I could keep up with. He wasn't on any business trip. He had been lying for who knows how long. The pain of realization was sharp, almost physical. I tried to focus on the rest of the day, but my mind was spinning, my thoughts dark and tangled. When Tom finally came home later that week, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary, I felt sick watching him. He kissed Mia's forehead and complained about the long flight he'd supposedly just endured. I said nothing about the call from his director. Instead, I watched and waited. The next day, as Tom took a long shower, I noticed his phone lying on the dresser, surprisingly not password protected at this moment. My hand shook as I picked it up and started going through his messages. There, right in front of me, were dozens of texts and photos, not just any photos, but intimate ones with his secretary, a young woman named Marissa. They spoke of meetings when he was supposedly working late and little getaways when he was on his so-called business trips. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands automatically worked to forward the messages and photos to my email. I needed proof. After I made sure there were no traces left of what I'd done, I put his phone back exactly where he'd left it. Tom came out of the shower, relaxed and oblivious to the storm raging inside me. He rambled on about his day, complained about being tired, and how he needed a quiet evening. Rough day? I managed to ask, keeping my voice neutral. Yeah, you know how it is. Non-stop action, he replied, collapsing on the sofa and flipping through the channels. I just nodded, feeling numb. After making sure the kids were settled in their beds, I sat at the dining table long after Tom went to bed, staring at the empty chairs around me. My life as I knew it was falling apart. Seeing Tom every day, knowing what I knew, was like swallowing poison. My heart burned with a silent rage, and yet I smiled through it all, keeping my plans close to my chest. I was going to expose his betrayal, his lies, in front of everyone we cared about. My birthday was fast approaching, and it would be the perfect stage for unveiling the truth. I started planning the party with a singular focus. I sent out invitations to all our family and friends, rehearsing my speech late at night when the house was quiet. Tom has been living a lie, I practiced saying to my reflection, my voice steady. And we've all been his audience. Tom seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil. He even helped with the party preparations, suggesting decorations and discussing the menu. His involvement was a cruel irony that wasn't lost on me. The day before my birthday, everything was set. The decorations were up, the food was ordered, and my speech was burned into my mind. That's when Tom dropped his bombshell. I've got to head out to the airport tonight. Urgent business in Chicago that can't wait. I'll be gone for 2 weeks, Tom announced casually over dinner, as if he were merely stepping out for a quick errand. My fork clattered to my plate. What? But my birthday is tomorrow. You can't be serious. Tom didn't meet my eyes. I'm really sorry, Gina. It's this new client, big opportunity. I can't pass it up. I knew better. There was no client, no business trip. It was her, his mistress. That's who he was choosing over me, over us, once again. Right. Work, I said, the word bitter on my tongue. I'll make it up to you, Gina. We'll celebrate when I get back, okay? He smiled at me, but I didn't return his smile. As he walked away, my thoughts raced. This was it, the moment where I could have brought everything crashing down around him. But he was leaving, and my plans for a public confrontation were ruined. I watched from the window as he drove away, my heart a mix of fury and despair. My birthday would still come, and though my plans were foiled for now, this wasn't the end. I would find another way, a better moment to reveal the truth. The morning after Tom left was the day of my birthday party. The house quickly filled with family and the warm chatter of familiar voices. My parents were the first to arrive, followed closely by Tom's parents, his sister Sarah, and her daughter Lily. They came bearing gifts and smiles, ready to celebrate. As the children played in the background, my mother-in-law, Helen, looked around, her expression turning puzzled. Where's Tom? Isn't he joining us for your birthday, Gina? I hesitated, a lump forming in my throat. I had planned this moment, rehearsed the words, but facing it head-on felt overwhelming. Actually, can we gather in the living room? There's something important I need to discuss with all of you, I managed to say, my voice steady. Curious and somewhat concerned, everyone moved to the living room, settling into the sofas and armchairs. I sent Lily to watch over the younger kids, ensuring they were occupied and away from what was about to be an adult conversation. Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath, holding onto the back of the couch for support. Helen's eyes were fixed on me, filled with worry. Gina, what's wrong? Where's our son? I pulled out my phone, opening the gallery where I'd saved the evidence of Tom's infidelity. There's no easy way to say this, but Tom hasn't been honest with us, I began, my voice clear despite the shaking of my hands. I turned the screen to face them, showing a photo of Tom with his mistress, their intimacy undeniable. A gasp echoed through the room, most audibly from Helen and Mike, Tom's parents. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. For years now, Tom has been distant, more involved with her than with his own family, I continued, the words tasting bitter. He told me he was on a business trip yesterday, on the eve of my birthday, but that was a lie. He's with her right now. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with betrayal and disbelief. Helen's face crumbled, tears welling up in her eyes. Mike's jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists. Helen reached out across the space between us, taking my hand. "Oh, Gina, how long have you known?" "Only a few days," I admitted. "I found out just before he left. I'm sorry to drop this on all of you like this, but I didn't know what else to do." Mike stood abruptly, pacing a few steps, before turning to face me. "He's my son, but I can't condone this. Not when he's hurt you and the kids like this. What are you planning to do, Gina?" My resolve hardened, fueled by their support. "I'm planning to file for divorce. I can't be with someone who has so little regard for his family." The room was quiet again, everyone processing the bombshell I had just dropped. Then, one by one, they began to express their support. "If that's your decision, you have our full support, Gina. You and the kids are our family too," Mike said firmly, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Helen squeezed my hand tighter. "Whatever you need, we're here for you. I'm so sorry our son caused you this pain." Sarah came over and hugged me. "We're with you, Gina. All the way. Tom needs to answer for this." I was glad my loved ones supported me, but I voiced a concern that had been gnawing at me ever since I decided on the divorce. "I don't know what I'm going to do next," I admitted to the room. "I can't stay in this house. It's too much. But I've got nowhere to go with the kids." My parents immediately offered to take us in. "You and the kids can come back home," my dad said, his voice steady and reassuring. But before I could respond, my father-in-law stood up. "Actually, the house you're living in now," Mike started, his tone serious, "it's under my name. I think it's best if we sell it. There's a house near ours that's just come on the market. It would be perfect for you and the kids." The room paused, everyone processing Mike's words. My mother-in-law clapped her hands, a smile spreading across her face. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Having the grandchildren close by, and Gina too, it would mean the world to us." The decision was made quickly after that. Mike and Helen moved forward with selling the house. It was a whirlwind, and before I knew it, they had not only sold it but also purchased the new home near them. The efficiency and support from Tom's family were overwhelming in the best way possible. The move was a flurry of activity. Boxes were packed, furniture moved, and my life repacked into a new setting with an incredible speed. My parents, Mike, Helen, and Sarah were all hands on deck, making the transition as smooth as possible. It was during these days of setting up our new home that I finally dealt with the last piece of my old life with Tom. I gathered all his belongings, which weren't many since he'd taken a lot with him on his supposed business trip. With the help of my father, I shipped everything to Tom's office. Included in the boxes was a letter, not just to him but to his director. I detailed everything, from the affair to the lies about his business trips. That night, after the kids had gone to bed in their new rooms, I stepped out onto the small porch of our new house. The air was cool, the sky clear and full of stars. Mike came outside, joining me. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm okay," I said, looking out into the night. "Actually, I'm more than okay. I feel free." Mike nodded, understanding. "Good. You deserve to be happy, Gina. All of you do. We will be," I replied, a newfound resolve strengthening within me. We're going to be just fine. And as we stood there, the quiet night around us, I believed it. With the support of my family and the promise of new beginnings, I was ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't just surviving, I was ready to thrive. The real drama unfolded when Tom returned from his business trip. He went straight to our old house, expecting everything to be as he left it. I heard about what happened next from Sarah, who heard it from a neighbor. Tom tried to unlock the door, but of course, the keys didn't work, new locks. He started pounding on the door, loud enough to startle the new tenants who had just moved in. Confused and annoyed, the man who opened the door was met with Tom's bewildered and angry face. "Where's Gina? What the hell are you doing in my house?" Tom had demanded, his voice booming. The new tenant, taken aback by Tom's aggression, threatened to call the cops. Tom, flustered and fuming, pulled out his phone and dialed my number. I answered, knowing this call was inevitable. "What the hell, Gina? Why can't I get into the house? Who are those people?" Tom's voice was loud and frantic over the phone. I replied calmly, each word deliberate and clear. "I sold the house, Tom. And I'm not going to tell you where we are now. You should probably go stay with your mistress." The line went silent for a moment before he erupted again, cursing, demanding explanations. But I had said what I needed to. I hung up, my heart pounding but my resolve steady. Tom, lost and desperate, went to his parents' house next. But Mike and Helen were firm. They had already chosen their stand. When Tom showed up at their doorstep, hoping for solace or a place to stay, Mike met him at the door. "We can't support you in this, Tom. What you did to Gina and the kids, we're ashamed," Mike had told him, his disappointment heavy in his voice. Tom lost it then, yelling about being their son and how they couldn't just turn him away. But Mike was adamant, the door closing on Tom's pleas and curses. Back at work, things didn't go any smoother for Tom. I got the details from my friend Liz, who works in HR at Tom's company. The director had called him in first thing, laying down the consequences of his actions, not just the affair, but the misuse of company time and resources. Tom was transferred to another branch effectively immediately. His secretary was fired, the company keen to wash their hands clean of any part in Tom's personal mess. Tom was livid, lashing out as he packed his things, kicking boxes, and throwing papers. It was a low point for him, but for me, it was a strange kind of closure. I filed for divorce shortly after, citing his infidelity. I included the evidence I had gathered, making sure my case was ironclad. I wasn't vengeful, but I needed to secure a future for our children. The court proceedings were swift, thanks to the overwhelming evidence and Tom's somewhat tarnished reputation. In the aftermath, I turned back to the one thing that always brought me peace, figure skating. I got a job teaching at a local rink. Morning sessions only, leaving my afternoons and evenings free to be with my kids. Life now is a far cry from where I was just a few months ago. The kids are thriving, closer to their grandparents, who spoil them rotten with love and toys. My evenings are filled with homework, laughter, and the occasional movie night. It's simple, but it's ours. I was sitting at my old wooden desk, crunching numbers like any other Thursday, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jane, my best friend since high school and practically family. "Hey, big party this Friday at Rick's place. You in? Could use a wing woman." Jane's message read. I texted back, "Sure, sounds fun. Been ages since we did something stupid." She replied instantly, "Awesome. Oh, and Tom's gonna be there. You'll finally meet the infamous BF." I rolled my eyes at that. Jane had been seeing Tom for a few months now, and she was head over heels. I hadn't met him yet, but from what Jane gushed about, he was the catch of the century. Closing my laptop, I glanced at the clock. It was nearly time to leave. I grabbed my things and headed out, deciding to swing by Grandma's on my way home. As I walked in, the smell of baking apples filled the air. Grandma was in the kitchen, pulling an apple pie out of the oven. "There's my girl," she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling. "Perfect timing. Help yourself to some pie." I hugged her, and she patted my back with her flour-dusted hand. "How you doing, honey?" "Actually going to a party tomorrow. Jane's boyfriend will be there. It's a meet and greet for me," I said, taking a bite of the warm pie. Grandma raised an eyebrow. "Boyfriend, huh? Don't let those boys mess with you or Jane." "We joked about that the other day," I laughed. "Said no man's born who could mess with our squad." "Good, keep it that way," she advised, her tone firm but loving. "Men come and go, but your bond with Jane, that's for keeps." I nodded, knowing she was right. After pie, I helped clean up and told her about the party details. She listened, nodding and tisk-ing in all the right places. The next day after work, I got ready for the party. Choosing an outfit was a battle between casual and trying too hard. I finally settled on a simple black top and jeans. It was Rick's place after all, not some fancy downtown club. I arrived a bit late, the place already buzzing with music and chatter. Jane spotted me first, waving frantically from across the room where she stood with a tall, dark-haired guy. "Emma, you made it. Come meet Tom," she shouted over the music. As I approached, Tom turned and smiled, his gaze lingering a bit too long for a casual once-over. "Heard a lot about you," he said, his voice smooth. "Only the good stuff, I hope," I replied, trying to match his casual demeanor. "All good, promise," Jane chimed in, her eyes darting between us. Something in her look made me cautious, but I brushed it off as party nerves. We chatted, the three of us, and Tom was charming, making me laugh more than I expected. But every now and then, his compliments felt a tad too pointed, his glances a little too sharp. I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut, blaming it on overthinking. After the party, things between Tom and me picked up speed faster than I ever expected. Just 3 months down the line, and there I was, standing in front of a mirror in a bridal shop, staring at my reflection in a white dress that I had picked out in a dizzying rush. My mom was with me, and she kept fussing over every little detail, making sure the veil sat just right on my head. "Emma, you look beautiful, honey. But are you sure? This all seems so fast," she said, her voice laced with worry. I forced a smile, trying to brush off the doubt that kept creeping up. "Mom, it's fine. We're fine. Tom's great, you know that." She sighed, smoothing down the fabric of my dress. "I know, I miss Jane being around." "Have you talked to her lately?" The mention of Jane was a jab to my gut. We hadn't spoken since the engagement party, a party she left early, with a tight smile and an even tighter hug goodbye. "Not really, Mom. You know how it is. Things just got a bit complicated." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of planning and tension. Jane's absence was a gaping hole in every festivity. I tried reaching out to her, but my calls went to voicemail, and my texts remained unanswered. It hurt more than I cared to admit, and with each passing day, the weight of her absence grew heavier. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The walk down the aisle was a mix of smiles and well wishes, but all I could see was the empty seat where Jane should have been. Tom stood at the altar, looking dapper and smiling broadly as I approached. His eyes were bright, but behind the joy, I caught a flash of something else. Was it impatience? We exchanged our vows, and the pastor pronounced us husband and wife. The reception that followed was lively, with music and laughter filling the air, but the celebrations felt hollow without Jane laughing and dancing beside me. During the reception, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach turn. Tom was talking to some of his buddies, not noticing I had walked up behind him. "Yeah, it's all set now. She's a good girl, got her head on straight, especially with finances. We'll be sitting pretty, you'll see," Tom said, a sly grin spreading across his face. His friend clapped him on the back, laughing. "Always had a sharp eye for the good ones, eh, Tom?" I stepped back, my heart racing. Was he talking about me? About us? What did he mean by that? I wanted to confront him, to ask him outright what he meant, but I hesitated, the fear of stirring up a scene at our own wedding holding me back. I forgot about that conversation the very next day. It was domestic, comfortable even, but there were undercurrents, ripples that kept disturbing the peace I desperately wanted to believe in. My job was one of those ripples. After the wedding, walking into work every day felt like stepping onto a stage. Jane's dad, Mr. Coleman, had always been good to me, but with Jane and I no longer talking, I was nervous about where I stood. Turns out, I didn't need to worry, at least not about my job. Mr. Coleman called me into his office about a week after I got back from the honeymoon. "Emma," he started, his voice all business, "I want to be clear. Whatever's happened between you and Jane, it's got nothing to do with work. You're a good accountant, and as long as that continues, there's a place for you here." I nodded, relieved yet still tense. "Thank you, Mr. Coleman. I appreciate that, really." He waved a dismissive hand. "All right, then, back to it." That brief conversation was a load off, but it wasn't the only weight I carried. Every couple of weeks, Tom and I would visit his mother in her home deep in the forest area, a quaint little cottage surrounded by all sorts of flora. She was a herbalist, her life dedicated to plants and potions. I respected her craft, but every visit was a test of my patience. The first time we went after getting married, her welcome was less than warm. "Oh, Tom, still with Emma, I see. I'd thought by now you'd have come to your senses," she'd said, eyeing me like I was a particularly disappointing batch of herbs. Tom had just laughed, his arm around my shoulder a little too tight. "Mom, come on. Emma's great, you know that." His mother clicked her tongue, shaking her head as she poured a viscous liquid into a jar. "If you say so. But remember, the offer stands. Jane would make a fine wife, knows her way around the kitchen and a balance sheet." The ride home that day was quiet. I stared out the window, my arms crossed, the hurt sitting heavy in my chest. "Your mom really doesn't like me, does she?" I finally said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Tom sighed, a quick glance in my direction before focusing back on the road. "She's old-fashioned, you know? Set in her ways. Just give it time." "But why doesn't it bother you?" "She's talking about your ex almost like I'm just warming your seat until you go back to her," I snapped, the frustration boiling over. He was silent for a long moment, then shrugged. "I don't know, Em. It's just how she is. Don't take it to heart." But how could I not? Each visit, each comment, it was like a reminder that I wasn't quite what anyone was expecting or hoping for. I was the placeholder, the not quite right choice. And with Tom's passive acceptance, I felt increasingly isolated in my own marriage. The day Grandma passed away was like someone had ripped the ground out from under me. She had been more than just family, she was my compass, especially in these stormy times. The funeral was a blur of somber faces and consoling pats on the back, all muffled under the heavy gray sky that seemed to press down just for me. After the funeral, we gathered at her lawyer's office for the reading of her will. I sat there, numb, not really expecting much. Then the lawyer announced it. Grandma had left her big house and $400,000 to me. Just me. My head spun, and from the corner of my eye, I caught Tom's reaction. His eyes didn't just light up, they practically sparked with excitement. "Wow, babe, that's amazing," Tom said, squeezing my hand a bit too tightly as we left the lawyer's office. "Your grandma really set us up." The discomfort started there, a nagging tug in my stomach. I tried telling myself it was just grief, that the unease was from losing Grandma, not from how Tom was acting. But deep down, I knew better. This was a different kind of discomfort, one that I couldn't just explain away. Back at home, things started to change. Tom began disappearing in the evenings, coming home later and later with barely an excuse that made sense. He'd brush off my questions with a flick of his hand. "Just out with the boys, you know how it is." But I didn't know. It all felt off. The final straw came one evening over dinner when he brought up the money and the house. Emma. He started, his voice casual as he passed me the salt. We should really think about investing that $400,000. And the house? We could sell it. Make a fortune and invest that too. I stared at him, my fork halfway to my mouth, the food suddenly tasteless. Sell Grandma's house? Are you serious? Yeah, why not? It's just sitting there, and think about the money we could make. He was all enthusiasm, as if he'd laid out the perfect plan. I put my fork down, my appetite gone. No, Tom. I'm going to rent it out. It's what she would have wanted, and the money's going into a fund for our future children's education. Tom's face changed then, his smile disappearing. That's a stupid idea, Emma. We could be rich if you weren't so sentimental about that old place. His words stung, and we ended up in a heated argument, voices raised, words that couldn't be taken back thrown carelessly into the space between us. He stormed off eventually, and we didn't speak for days. The next time Tom and I spoke, it was awkward, a thin veneer of normalcy painted over our unresolved conflict. Look, Emma, I'm sorry for blowing up, he said one evening, his voice soft, almost contrite. I just think we need to think about our future, about making the most of what we've got. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, my words likely to betray the resentment that had started to fester. We'll do it your way, he added, but the way he said it, like a concession rather than agreement, left me cold. As days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. Tom spent more time out, and I spent more time at Grandma's house, planning the renovations needed to turn it into a rental property. It was one of those rare Sundays when we didn't have much planned, so Tom suggested we go visit his mom. I agreed reluctantly. Each visit was harder than the last, but I didn't want to be the reason he couldn't see his mother. She greeted us with her usual reserved smile, but it didn't take long for the atmosphere to shift. Not even halfway through dinner, she started rubbing her temples, her sighs heavier than the humid summer air. I've been feeling so unwell lately, she moaned, casting a pointed glance my way as if my mere presence might be the cause. Tom immediately jumped to her aid, his voice filled with concern. Mom, what's wrong? Is there anything we can do? I knew that tone, it was the prelude to him volunteering my time like it was his to give. And sure enough, his next sentence was directed at me. Emma, maybe you could stay here for a few days? Help Mom out? I was already shaking my head before he finished. Tom, I've got a packed schedule at work. Besides, maybe it's time to consider a more permanent solution? I don't trust modern medicine, she snapped, waving a dismissive hand at me. Her other hand gestured towards the shelves lined with herbs and bottles. I have my remedies. I just need a bit of help around here, that's all. The ride home was icy. Tom's disappointment was palpable, a thick fog that filled the car and left no room for reasoned conversation. I'm not sure you really love me, he said suddenly, his voice cold and distant. Refusing to help my mom says a lot about your feelings towards my family. I turned to him, stunned. How can you question my love based on this? I've supported every decision, attended every family gathering, and now you say this? You don't act like someone who's part of this family. Maybe I made a mistake marrying you. He shot back, the words slicing through the last threads of my patience. Are you saying you want a divorce? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. If things don't change, maybe I do, he replied curtly, his profile stark against the passing streetlights. The next few weeks were rough. Tom withdrew further, busying himself with anything that meant not having to spend time with me. At night, he'd talk to his mother on speakerphone, her loud, self-pitying complaints about her health echoing through our apartment. Oh, Tom, I don't know how much longer I can manage on my own, she'd wail. Your wife doesn't even care if I die. And each time, Tom would look at me with accusation in his eyes, as if her health was my responsibility. After several nights of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I started wearing earplugs, the soft foam a blessed barrier against her manipulative moans. It was a usual Thursday afternoon when I decided to check our joint savings account, a routine I had pushed aside for months due to the constant chaos at home. Logging in, I anticipated seeing our usual balance, but the numbers that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. The account was nearly drained. Stunned, I scrolled through the transaction history. Large withdrawals stamped with just ATM and no further explanation. My heart raced as I pieced together that these withdrawals coincided with the nights Tom came home late or not at all. I felt a sickening mix of betrayal and panic gnawing in my stomach. I couldn't confront Tom, not yet. I needed more information, something concrete before I sparked a confrontation that I wasn't prepared to handle. That's when the idea of hiring a private detective came to me. I found a reputable detective online and explained my situation over a hushed phone call from the back of a cafe. 3 agonizing weeks later, the detective called me back. "We need to meet," was all he said. Sitting across from him in a dimly lit corner of a different coffee shop, the detective laid it all out. "Your husband's in deep," he started, his eyes not leaving the file in front of him. "He's racked up a significant amount of gambling debt. The kind that gets dangerous." My hands trembled. "How bad?" "Bad enough that he's desperate. He's been talking about your finances, specifically your inheritance, as a way out." I recorded a conversation between him and his mother. "It seems they have plans for your assets." He played the audio clip. Tom's voice, casual and cold, discussing how soon my money would fix everything. I felt nauseous listening to his plans, spoken so freely, as if I was nothing more than an obstacle to be dealt with. I was still reeling from this revelation when my phone buzzed. It was Jane, my long-lost friend, the one person I thought I had pushed too far away to ever return. Her text was simple: "Need to talk. Can you meet today?" Hours later, I sat across from Jane in yet another cafe, the noise around us a stark contrast to the silence that had stretched between us for months. She looked nervous, playing with her coffee cup before she spoke. "Emma, I'm here because Tom has been contacting me. He's made advances, said things." She paused, her voice shaking. "He told me he made a mistake marrying you, that he should have been with me all along." I felt like I was in a nightmare, everything spinning out of control. "You're telling me this now? Why?" "Because he asked me to do something unthinkable. He wanted me to convince my dad to fire you. Said that once you were jobless, you'd have no choice but to depend on him, to move in with his mother." She pushed her phone across the table, playing a recording of their conversation. Tom's voice, clear and manipulative, detailing his plan like he was plotting a business move. I sat there, stunned and heartbroken. Not just by Tom's betrayal, but by the enormity of his deceit and manipulation. Leaving the cafe, I felt a mix of fear and clarity. It was clear now that Tom and his mother were not just overbearing, they were dangerous. The drive over to Tom's mother's house that weekend felt longer than usual. I felt like I was heading straight into the lion's den, armed with nothing but a fragile plan and a heavy heart. When we arrived, his mother greeted us with her customary cold warmth, a thin smile that never quite reached her eyes. Almost immediately, she started her usual routine of complaints and thinly veiled barbs. "Oh, Emma, dear, I'm just so frail these days, barely can manage on my own," she lamented as we settled into the musty living room. I nodded, my stomach churning, but I had my own plans. "Why don't we start with a little walk outside? Some fresh air might do us all good." His mother hesitated, then agreed, shuffling towards the door with more agility than her complaints suggested. Once outside, I made a show of tying my shoelace and let them walk ahead, slipping back into the house under the guise of grabbing a forgotten sweater. Once inside, I quickly turned on the dictaphone app on my phone and tucked it under a cushion on the sofa. My heart pounded as I rejoined them, the device now safely recording whatever would transpire in my absence. We walked for a bit, the conversation light, but my mind was elsewhere. After making sure they were well engaged in idle chatter, I excused myself, claiming a sudden headache and the need for a quick lie down. They continued their walk, and I rushed back, my steps as silent as a whisper. Hiding in the small pantry, I strained my ears. Soon, their voices floated through the door, Tom's laced with excitement, his mother's dripping with sinister joy. "It's almost ready, Mom. Once Emma moves in for a few weeks to help out, we can start with the herbs you prepared," Tom said, his voice a cold hiss that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Tom, dear, everything's prepared. Those special herbs of mine, they work fast and leave no trace. Just make sure she drinks her tea every morning. No one will suspect a thing," his mother replied, her giggle sending waves of horror through me. "And once she's gone, no more debts hanging over my head. I can finally clean up my mess and move on. Maybe with Jane," Tom continued, unaware of the betraying silence that filled the rest of the house. Feeling like my entire body was encased in ice, I carefully made my way out and back to the empty living room. I retrieved my phone, stopping the recording and slipping it into my pocket, a heavy weight of evidence against them. That night, I lay awake, the recording playing over and over in my head. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to act, and fast. The morning couldn't come soon enough, and with it, I'd begin setting my plan into motion. I never thought I'd have to act in my own life as if it were some dramatic scene from a movie. But there I was, coming home from work, feigning despair. I threw my bag on the sofa, letting out a heavy sigh as I collapsed beside it. "I got fired today," I announced, my voice thick with mock desperation. "Jane's dad kicked me out at her request. There's nothing left for me here now." Tom froze, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and, disgustingly, a spark of glee. "You got fired? Really? Well, that's unfortunate, babe. But hey, maybe this is for the best, you know? Now you can move in with my mom, help her out. She needs you." His words, so predictably selfish, fueled my silent fury. "No, Tom. I will never move in with her." "I can't believe you'd even ask that of me," I shot back, standing to face him, my voice rising in controlled anger. His face contorted with frustration as he yelled back, "If you won't do that for me, for us, then maybe we shouldn't be together. Maybe we should just get a divorce." The word divorce hung in the air like a promise. I reached into my bag, my hand clasping the divorce papers I had prepared. Smiling thinly, I handed them to him. "You want a divorce, Tom? You got it. I've signed the papers. It's over." His expression, a mix of confusion and horror, was almost satisfying. "What? You knew? You want this?" "I know everything, Tom," I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "About your debts, your plans with your mom, everything." As realization dawned on him, his shock turned to anger, and he stepped towards me menacingly. But before he could reach me, the front door burst open. 2 police officers entered, their presence a wall between me and Tom. Tom paled, his anger deflating as he realized the extent of his exposure. "We have enough evidence to hold you and your mother," one officer announced as they cuffed him. "You're both under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder." The trial was swift. The recordings I had made were damning. In court, faced with the undeniable evidence, Tom and his mother confessed to their horrific plans. They were sentenced to several years in prison. Amidst it all, Jane was there, her presence a silent support I hadn't realized I'd missed so deeply. We walked out together, the weight of the past few months lifting slightly with each step. "Let's never let anyone come between us again," she said, squeezing my hand. "Never," I agreed, feeling the truth of our reconciliation. It felt like coming home.